Hit your head, Piper? I'm sorry, hit your head. Did I hit my head? Oh, I'm just icing everything after this.
We are live.
Okay. The call to order the special board meeting, planning meeting via video teleconference. Let the record show that all members are present. Ms. Springate is present virtually tonight. So, Sherry, can we hear from you?
Yes.
Okay. The first thing on the agenda is opportunity.
Madam Chairperson?
Yes.
Can I ask you a question about item D under the regular agenda? Discussion and possible action on timing and logistics concerning reentry. Would that allow a vote on allowing virtual middle and high school students the opportunity to return to in-school classes on September 28th if they choose?
Grant, is Grant on?
Yes.
I want Grant to weigh in, but I'll give you my answer. My understanding is this was language for item D that was worked on with Mr. Hawkins and Mr. Chenoweth for the last meeting as a way to kind of cover those, pretty much all the topics under that issue. And I do believe, like last week, we didn't even have hiring new teachers outlined, but it was covered under that. So my thought is that it would cover that. Mr. Chenoweth, are you in agreement?
The agenda item is broad enough to cover that as a discussion topic. It's the advice of our office that that level of logistics is an administrative decision and not a board decision.
Whether some of our students can come back into our buildings is an administrative issue as opposed to a...
That it's, yeah, when you make the distinction between management and governance, that is a administrative level decision of logistics and curriculum and delivery of instruction.
Madam Chairperson, I vehemently disagree with that opinion of our attorney.
Mr. Chenoweth, when we get to that point, can we discuss that then, Ambrose? And I also would probably have questions with Mr. Chenoweth at that point as to what recourse any parent would have who find themselves not able to bring their children back into the school with the rest of the children, considering how many times we've changed and how the circumstances and the experience of Virtual Academy have rolled out.
I'd be happy to discuss that more when you get to that agenda topic. We
definitely will. Is that okay, Mr. Wilson? Well, we will definitely get into that at that time. Before that, we have a couple more agenda items can we get through those and then bring it up at that point? Mr. Wilson?
I'll be happy to discuss at item D.
Okay, during that discussion at that time. Okay. All right, the first thing on the agenda is opportunity for public comment.
I do still have 6 minutes left in the public comment section.
Pardon me?
I do still have 6 minutes left to accept public comments also, so we may have to come back to it.
Okay. We need to adjust that window. Yeah, that's on, we're gonna have to look at that. Let's see how long it takes her to read these. How many do you
Just
have?
one.
Just one. Okay. So I think what we'll do is read this one, and we'll go to our reports, and then read what you get, Angel, because I don't think they're going to have anything to do with the instructional update and all that. Go ahead.
Okay, this is from Christy Gresham. Good evening. I am writing this as a concerned parent of a 6th grader. I have previously expressed my disappointment in the virtual learning plan at Woodford County Middle School to the principal and to my board member. Today, when I learned that Edgenuity will continue to be used for in-person learning, I felt the need to expand my reach. I have fears about my child attending in-person school. However, I've made the decision to send him because I believe he will benefit from teacher-led instruction versus the current virtual learning plan. I assumed the two would be quite different. I assumed that once he returned to in-person school, he would be taught solely by teachers rather than through Edgenuity. I learned today that my assumption was wrong. I do understand the need to make sure that curriculum for virtual students and in-person students keeps the same pace. I understand that we could go back to all virtual at a moment's notice and need to keep everyone learning seamlessly. I also understand that there may be groups of students that need to continue learning virtually while under an isolation order. I would think to accomplish sameness in all groups that the teachers could use Edgenuity as a pacing guide but not as a teaching tool. By this, I mean that teachers teach in-person kids and Edgenuity teaches virtual kids, but they are always on the same lesson. Edgenuity should not be used to teach in-person kids. What is the benefit of assuming the risks that come with sending my child to school if he won't have teacher-led instruction in all classes? I've reached out to my child's teachers. I know that some teachers plan to teach the content. However, this is not the case with all classes. Some classes will be taught by teachers, some will be taught by Edgenuity with teachers filling in the gaps, and some will be a mixture of both. This is a disservice to our children. We have great teachers in Woodford County. They need to teach. I personally don't understand why that wasn't the plan all along. Other middle schools and other schools in our district have teacher-led instruction through Google Meets. Why not Woodford Middle School? This has gone on long enough. It is not acceptable to use the virtual platform to teach in-person students. I appreciate all of the work done by every single person in our education system. The gravity of planning and delivering a quality education during a global pandemic is not lost on me. However, one must be able to pivot if the original plan is failing. I know we are in uncharted waters. Change course or learn to swim faster. Drowning is not an option when children are at stake. Sincerely, Christy Gresham.
Thank you. All right, let's go on to the instructional equity task force update.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'll start with the equity update. Yeah, good there? All right, we'll start with the equity team. Equity update, I should say, overall. So last Monday, we had a really productive day. During the late afternoon, we did Module 2 training for our administrators and our teacher leads. I've been updating you on this because that's a big element of our action plan is taking them through professional development in regard to cultural responsiveness. So at this point, training our principals and leads on Module 2, which was trauma-informed practices, which is very relevant for obvious reasons. We had done a series of training from a school level team that we have, district level team. But at this point, it was excellent to take yet another look at that and another approach based on the summer that our students have gone through, not only with social injustices, but also with COVID and all that has been experienced there. So the plan is for those school teams to then deliver that module in October. So we train in 1 month and deliver to staff, to teachers the following month. And it is our hope to continue that, of course, based on circumstances. Later on that evening, our equity team met again. It was nice to reestablish our regular meeting and how we will conduct that. One of the major things that we talked about was our membership going into this year. And part of that is including students. Beyond Ms. McCown, I kept her posted. We weren't ready to add her just yet, but we do want to add other members. And through the help of Ms. Wilson, Kristen Wilson, we'll reach out to the group that we met with last year to get more student representation. So moving forward, likely at our October meeting is when we'll be ready to add our students in. And then also with our equity team, something that really needed to be done and we're just waiting for the right moment was to reevaluate our equity action plan. We have a number of items on there, and of course circumstances have thrown us off track in terms of getting those completed. So we went through each and every component of our action plan and each and every task and adjusted timelines as needed and identified priority areas that we want to work on now. The number one priority is continuing through that professional development series that I mentioned. along with a few others. So again, it was a very productive day, good to reestablish. After an up and down summer, we were able to meet twice, I believe, over the summer, but it was good to reestablish a regular protocol, regular process. One other thing I wanted to mention that was reported on with the equity team is a book study that was held over the summer. This was very organic, came about with the high school, so it was mainly high school participants, early June, after events that they wanted to do book studies related to social injustice, the racial unrest that was going on still. So they identified, I think, 5 different books. And again, it was a very organic process where teachers led those book studies over the course of the summer. And so several from the team were able to report out on that. Our plan moving forward is to then share the wealth and have those titles available again for anyone within the district who'd like to participate. Timing is of essence there. It's probably not the best time to start a book study, but we want, once we get in, looking at probably second semester, to offer that again. So that's what I have in regard to equity. In terms of task force, we have not met recently, but likely to meet again after the 28th, once we have re-entered, just so that we know what that looks like, both virtual and in person, and able to help support how that transition goes moving forward. That's task force. In regard to instructional, if you remember when I reported last month, we had the visual of our dual reentry system and how now we were all coming together with virtual, and then eventually we're going to come back out in regard to elementary and middle. So now we're coming back out, if you remember that flow chart, how that went. And so since that time, with all 3 levels, we've been preparing to go back to a dual system reentry. With virtual specifically, elementary, we've had to reorganize based on student numbers to establish a combined virtual academy among the 4 schools. So as we spoke week before last, this required some added staff at our elementary level, and it requires some combination of students and staff among all 4 elementaries. So we've established structures so that we have 380, I believe that number has gone up just a little bit, 386, thank you. 386 students who will continue virtual in elementary. So there's a number of supports that are needed there. Administrative support, counseling support, technology support, gifted services. So we've outlined structures for the whole virtual academy there in regard to elementary. For secondary levels, they continue to monitor. Sir. Yes, sir.
Who's we?
I'm sorry?
You say we have done this, we have done that. Who's we?
Dr. Jones and I have led most of that. The elementary principals, we met a number of times over the past couple of weeks to monitor the numbers. They identified those teachers, those that need to remain on virtual instruction, and also had to recruit several more so that we could have enough teachers to meet the student need. Have met with them twice now, and then over the course of this week, meeting with each grade level team to continue to iron out all the logistics and processes for this.
You made reference to additional resources were necessary. What are you referring to?
So had to identify administrative support, counseling support, ESL support, special education, all of those. When we look at what students are going to remain in virtual academy for elementary, we've got to have all that aligned. And who is going to do that? Especially when we are combining among all 4 elementary.
Did you find those resources within our existing employees, existing staff?
We were able to do that. Outside of the teacher hires that we had to do, most of which were for in-person positions, I believe we've added 2 that for virtual. But yes, beyond that, we've used current staff to do that.
The superintendent has made reference on numerous occasions, if you have problems or concerns, call your principal. If you're in the, quote, virtual academy, who would you call?
Mr. Joe Albert, who is our new dean at the middle school. He had already been identified to be over the middle school virtual academy. He will also serve in that role over the elementary virtual academy. I will work very close with Mr. Albert with my elementary experience and my knowledge of the people that are working within it, but he will be that first point of contact there.
What site-based council will work with the virtual academy?
Well, given that it's its own entity, and I don't really know that they can answer to all four, that will be a district-run program at this time. That is my understanding. It's very unique, obviously, in how we're doing this.
So they'll not have the resource of the site-based council like the four other elementary schools will have.
They would have the consultation among the four, but again, just to have direct guidance that will come from our office.
Whose idea was that?
Idea?
Not to have site-based council assigned to the virtual academy.
I don't know that you could elect and assign for such a circumstance.
It's not an A1 school, it is a district program at this point in time. The district program doesn't necessarily have to have site-based council.
What other things do they not necessarily have to have that the other students have?
Like they wouldn't necessarily, I mean, they could participate in their own school events. Like if they wanted to be on the academic team or something like that for their own school, they could continue to do that. But this is a district program, much like Safe Harbor Academy. Safe Harbor Academy does not have its own site-based council. And this is, it is a program, it is an alternative to the normal in-person instruction. And so it is treated like an alternative program.
So, but if they wanted to be on the academic team at Simmons, they could do that.
At their home school.
At Simmons.
At their home school. Just like we've allowed Safe Harbor students to participate at the high school or the middle school if they qualify, if they meet the qualifications to be able to participate. We've done that, yes.
The Safe Harbor is an alternate program, is that what you're referring to?
It's an alternative program, yes.
Alternative program, and they have a principal for, what, 28 students?
They have an administrator, yes, for that program.
Your alternative program will have a principal for 800 students.
He will oversee the middle school program
and the
elementary program.
And there's 800 students approximately, won't there be?
Right.
So
of course, you don't have the day-to-day responsibilities of inside the building, supervision, those types of things. He was very comfortable doing that. He has a great technology background, and we do have counseling support, as well as ESL support and gifted support to go along with that.
Where will the counseling support come from?
It will come from Ms. Bargo, who is at Southside. She is going to serve the elementary portion, and she'll do some of her duties at Southside because they have a second counselor.
What about social work? Will there be a social worker assigned to your virtual academy?
If there is social work need, we can Ms. Bargo can deal with that initially, and if there's any outside resources that are necessary, that can be provided. We don't have a social worker at each elementary school now.
What if each student will have a teacher, a Woodford County teacher?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So kind of along the lines of we want to maintain connection to their home school, both for the students and the teachers. But at the same time, this is a unique circumstance where they will work together in a grade level. You may have a teacher from Huntertown, Northside, and Southside. They do need to work together to serve our Woodford County students. So we want to maintain that connection, yet we're in this unique experience together.
Can I just follow up real quickly?
Yes.
So we're only talking about the elementary school?
Only elementary so far.
So with the middle school, they have a principal. And the principal there will be the virtual principal and the in-person principal. So it's just the elementary that we're having to kind of pull from every school. But their principal will be in charge of, that's who they'll reach out to, is their principal of middle school there. And their site base, they'll have a site base and a middle school site base. Will they be overseeing the virtual academy as well? Curriculum and things, or those kinds of decisions?
So the unique arrangement for elementary
Right.
is such because we're
Because
four
pulling
schools.
from
Exactly.
schools, exactly, but for
And-
the high school and middle school,
Right.
that's really not the case.
So the administrator, who's Mr. Albert, will serve over the elementary and the middle school virtual academy. Now, ultimately,
Right.
the head principal is Ms. Kirk at
Right, so there's
at Woodford
that reassignment for virtual for middle and high, because we don't need to, because
Correct.
there's still just one entity.
Correct, yes. So 4 secondary levels, so they've monitored feedback and student progress to make adjustments to their virtual academy and structures and how they're going to move forward with that. Similar to elementary, they've had to make some changes to staffing and supports. Just a teacher out on leave, I know, as example at high school, had to pull someone else in, and other supports. Also, they've been making course content adjustments, and specific to middle school, tasking out assignments by the day rather than the percentage completion for the week to allow students to organize their workload. And I firsthand have seen that to be a very helpful step for our students based on my own students at home, being able to task that out by the day and what they have to complete each day. So for in-person, they've had to go back to their plans that they had in early August, because that's what we were focused on then, having dual entry, working on both of those, because a lot of different things in terms of Healthy at School guidance have changed. I shouldn't say a lot, several things have changed. There have been some updates, and they've had to make changes to their logistics, so that's what they're getting ready for next week for the 28th. They've also had to work through staffing plans. As you know, we've had to add some staff for in-person as well, some new hires, as well as then also determining who would be serving the virtual academy. So at that point, again, preparing for dual reentry, dual system, I should say, and making sure that both are staffed appropriately and that we have our structures in place.
How many Woodford County teachers will be assigned to the elementary alternative school?
16.
16.
16 classroom teachers, yes.
16, and how many students?
386
386?
at last count. That we've had some new enrollees. At last count, when we first planned it, it was 386. It does not.
How many teachers have been assigned to the middle school alternative school?
It's not an alternative school.
Okay, what is it?
I said it was similar to an alternative program. It
What
is
would-
a virtual,
What would you
Learning
prefer me? What would you prefer us to refer to it?
it's a virtual academy.
Virtual academy, based on the.
That's
based
what
on-
it is.
Okay, but it's a virtual academy. You're the one that said it was very similar to the
I
alternative.
explained, I said it was similar to the alternative program when you were asking about a site-based counseling.
You said it was an alternative. It was based on that was an alternative school. The virtual elementary will be an alternative concept also, and therefore does not need a site-based counselor.
Because I said it was similar to Safe Harbor Academy,
Okay.
which is an alternative program.
Right. You said it's similar to an alternative program. I referred to it as an alternative program. I will refer to it as a virtual academy. All right. How many teachers are assigned to the middle school virtual academy?
12 content area teachers, so 4 per grade level, 6, 7, and 8, 12.
And how many students does that make?
Last count was 300.
And then what about the high school
High
virtual
school
academy?
At last count, I had 16 teachers. 13, I'm sorry, 13 teachers.
For how many students?
Approximately 450. 450,
13 teachers for 450?
yes.
What's that teacher-student ratio there? 35 students per teacher? Do you believe in the virtual academy, will teachers have daily access? Will students have daily access to teachers?
Daily access, most definitely, yes.
When we go back to school on the 28th, I think we all understand there's a possibility we may not make it the whole year for various factors. What is the instructional plan for our students should we have to suspend in school services?
So part of that will be a timing. If it looks like it's going to be long-term, we would basically have to come back to what we're doing now. If it were short-term, we would treat it as such. I would say similar to NTI, that students are given, and I hate to put number of days to this, but a week's worth of assignments to complete from that given class. We'll answer, we'll monitor. I hate to predict, and I've said in some cases I'm giving up predicting because the circumstances are constantly changing. But to answer your question, we would first have to evaluate if that looks like it's going to be short-term or long-term.
If it was long-term?
If it were long-term, as I said, more of a system of what we're in right now, and that we've been in since, what, August 26th was our start date? Yes.
So you have some kids in virtual, some kids in person online, or would you try to have everybody virtual or everyone in person online?
I'm going to go back to that graphic, like, you had elementary and middle coming in, we're all virtual, now we're trying to go back out, we may have to come back in and all go virtual again.
Sorry, I just want to clarify this. All right, so elementary is a district program. Virtual is a district program because we're trying before. Is the middle school virtual a district program, or are they under the site base of the middle school principal and all of that?
Yes, it's part of the middle school.
So they're not a separate district. They're all, and same with the high school.
And just,
okay, I just want to make sure that
right.
Who's in charge, like, so site base would have some input and say, and you know, we would have to defer to them on some of the virtual stuff too.
yes.
Okay, that's just what
yes.
okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
And just let me clarify why the combination, I think you understand, but
Yeah.
when the numbers came back, and this is just an example, and I may have even stated this before, you might have had 8 students at second grade at Southside. So, and you had a number of those instances. To try to staff all of those per school, when I did the math, we're looking at probably adding another 9 teachers beyond the 8 that we already had. So that necessitates.
No, and that makes perfect sense to me. I just wanted to make sure that I understood kind of the governance. I
Sure.
understand why the elementary is like
Okay.
that. I just wanted to clarify on the middle and not. Okay.
That was my 3 topics in terms of task force, equity, and then the instructional update. Any other questions at this time?
On the task force, how many members of that are there, of the task force?
Mid-20s, 26. We kind of lost some members over the course of the summer, but I believe about 26.
And what is their charge?
Their charge was to plan supports, really, both student and staff supports. We focused on 3 different areas: curriculum instruction, social emotional, and then special populations.
Were they involved in the selection of Ingenuity and Odyssey?
Not directly, no.
Who was involved in that?
Our administrative team, first and foremost, and then from there at school levels, move forward with the planning and how, to what level that would be used.
Are we using Odysseyware?
We are not. We are not using Odysseyware.
We've been told the whole time we've been using Odysseyware.
Yeah, and I will take total responsibility for that. I didn't feel Odysseyware met our needs. Once we got the full course content load, when Dr. Jones and I began to try to build those courses, just didn't feel it met our needs. And beyond that, and I stressed this before, especially at our elementary levels, our younger students needed more live instruction than what OdysseyWare would provide. So once we got into building those courses, I have a fourth grader. I wouldn't want my fourth grader going through that as the primary resource. So since that time, we've taken that money and geared it towards another program that would be more supplemental, geared towards basically filling in gaps based on their time out of school, or enriching along grade level content, or extending beyond based on where they're at from a screener instrument used at the beginning.
You may not know the answer to this, but what is the cost of Odyssey, and what is the new elementary platform that we're talking about? Is there a name to it?
There is a name. It's called Pathblazer. I hate to do that. Pathblazer, yes. Because once we had OdysseyWare, I was wore out with that word. But it is Pathblazer. The cost for that subscription district-wide is, I believe, $29,000 for a district-wide subscription.
Are we able to get the money back from OdysseyWare from that?
It was just transferred.
Oh,
It was just transferred. It falls under the same company.
I see.
You just like many other things, you have an umbrella company and lots of other products and sub-companies underneath.
What's the cost of Ingenuity?
I do not know that one.
Superintendent Hawkins?
I'm not aware of what our district-wide subscription is.
Because we have had that for several years. Gibson,
I can look it up.
We have to pay more for license if the more kids are using it, you know that, or?
I'm going to rely on Bob to look it up.
Yeah.
Everybody had a subscription. We had it for every middle school and high school student before.
For several years.
Once you get on many of these, once you get to a certain point, you just buy a district-wide license rather than
Then
one by one.
okay.
Yeah.
So, will we continue using Edgenuity for in-class instruction?
Within a blended model is my understanding. If Ms. Kirkwood, anything to add to that?
Yeah, we're at the middle school. What we're trying to do is not completely go away from it, because there is some valid lessons in there. It aligns with our essential standards. So we're just asking the teachers to use the lessons or videos as they need. So that's kind of what we're going to do, is more of a blended model with the in-person.
Go ahead.
So, it's possible then that the kids will be in class using their Chromebooks, watching a lesson taught on Ingenuity?
I wouldn't say lesson taught. I would say more of the video, or if there's like something that they'd like to show them. They might even have it up for a bell ringer. Like there's lesson activity, the teacher might actually pull it up and use it as a bell ringer, while the other kids are watching. They're not necessarily sitting down watching another teacher teach.
And will then, we've had the kind of goals and gotten away from the percentage of completion.
Yes.
So that would not be something.
Correct.
It would
Yeah,
just
we're
be-
no longer doing percentages.
Okay,
We listen to feedback and adjust it quickly.
thank you. That definitely was something that we were hearing a lot. And I would say there are certainly lots of things that we have to address with virtual learning. But I also feel like it's important to note that it has not all been bad.
Thank you.
There are positive situations. I know it firsthand. We share a lot about what our kids' experience is. My daughter's in 5th grade, and she's had a wonderful online experience. She comes down happy and engaged, and I'm very grateful for the teachers and how hard they worked to make those positive things. I just want to make sure that we're sharing on both sides.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I ask Ms. Kirk, so we just had a public comment, so let me just be clear, because I think the public comment was referring to the fact that in person, if I was understanding it correctly, was going to continue to use Edgenuity in middle school. So you're saying it's going to just be used as a little bit of a supportive, supplemental thing?
Correct.
There is not going to be a music class or an English class or a math class or anything, any class
Not straight
that is
Edgenuity.
totally Edgenuity.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
That's actually a good question too. Where are the guidelines on the music classes? I know that we were waiting for further instruction on whether we could have.
Like KMEA?
Yeah.
Yes. What do you mean, where are
Like,
they?
can we have band class? Can we have?
So high school, correct me if I'm wrong, we're waiting till second semester for band.
Correct.
Middle school is attempting, that's their plan. They have sent us a list of PPE necessary, like instrument covers and some other things that are necessary, that we intend to purchase so that band can happen, follow guidelines.
And choir and chorus
Yeah.
Orchestra.
at the high school too? Great. I know that was something that we were kind of waiting for further information on.
Orchestra, yes, as well. That's a little bit easier.
Yeah, it seems like the easiest of.
Blowing through the instrument.
Yeah.
So yes, what we have paused on is elementary level, 5th grade orchestra at this time. Traveling to different schools and
Yes.
we haven't been in. And first time they pick it up, probably not a good idea to do that virtually.
And are there any other specials that have been affected? Trying to think through everything.
Cooking, culinary, things like that, is that?
At least at the high school level, and there's been, to answer your question, no, there has been conversations to what does it look like to clean up the lab and the culinary room? What does it look like to clean the equipment in the gymnasium, things of that nature. Those classes will still go as well.
And Bob got a number just for backup for, and again, it's a district-wide license which covers middle school, high school, and safe harbor, $28,750 for engineering.
And that was not an additional cost, Bob? Because we'd already bought a
We've been
district
invited for
license.
several years. Safe harbors use it, high school and middle school. Use it
Okay.
over years.
Ron, let me ask you, Monday, families move into the community. They move into Midway. They go to Northside to sign up their children for Northside. Where will they, what will they do?
Brand new enrollees, just
Brand new
moved in.
enrollees.
I think they would enroll in person. However, we would have to look at class sizes. I mean, down to the individual second grade room. Because at the same time, we are trying to maintain COVID cap size to maintain some amount of distance within a classroom.
But if somebody from a completely new student, either elementary, middle, or high school age level, they would be offered in-school instruction if there were class space.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. We've got
Well, I
new
think
enrollees.
what I would say is because they are a brand new student, they would be given the same choice that every other parent was given in July.
They would be allowed,
They would be given the same choice. Every other parent in our district was given that same choice.
right, they would be given that choice, but they could start in class on the 28th.
Yes, sir.
Yes, but you will be recommending that people who signed up for virtually and live within the county now will not be offered that opportunity.
Until Christmas, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I do worry a little bit about that, and we're going to talk about it later, that people who have lived here for 20 years make a difference, make a different choice than they made in July. This board has made 3 different decisions since July, and yet someone who just moves in gets an opportunity to take a spot that they might have wanted to have. So that's going to be another consideration when we talk about that. Okay, anything else for Mr. Asher?
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
Academically, if a virtual student went to in-person class on the 28th, would there be a transition problem with that?
On the 28th?
Right.
Well, all starting on the 20th, so there wouldn't be. No
But I mean, if a virtual student was allowed to go in person on the 28th, who had signed up for virtually, could that be an easy transition?
Well, certainly at this point, again, because they're all virtual, so there would be no transition issue.
It would depend a little bit on their schedule, but Mr. Howard, would you like to address that?
Yeah, I think at the high school it would be pretty difficult based on the way that we have gone with the virtual academy and then the in-person online. As we've been talking about, virtual academy, the primary platform being Edgenuity, in-person online, and I won't get into all the details, but essentially they're providing their own curriculum, and I think most of you are aware and have been witness to that schedule. So it's essentially two different things. We've had to do that based on AP classes, dual credit classes, electives that we were offering in person that Edgenuity doesn't offer, and then vice versa, electives that Edgenuity offers that we don't offer in person. So in the case of the high school, at least, and I won't speak for anyone else, yes, that would be a difficult transition.
Would it be an impossible transition or a difficult transition?
I don't know if I would say anything's impossible, but I would say it would be extremely difficult. I think it'd be hard. I think you're really putting the student in a bad spot.
What would you do if the high schools, there are other high schools in the vicinity using Ingenuity? I would suspect Fayette County using that.
I don't know.
I don't think so. I'm not certain.
Okay, but if a student from another district was using a similar platform, would we allow them to go?
Well, whether we allow it, I think is a different question than does it make it a difficult transition on the student? And again, being in a couple different districts, and I'll argue this time and time again, students who have been on Edgenuity, whether it's coming from an alternative school or even coming from another district, is a difficult transition. One, you're talking about a different mindset with regards to flexibility, with regards to the self-discipline that goes. 3, the Edgenuity being the teacher of record as opposed to the teacher itself. Obviously, the content is much different, so yes. Now, does it happen? Sure, it happens. Is it a difficult transition? Most definitely.
But we would allow someone who moved in the county who is currently in an Ingenuity high school, whether it be whatever county, we would allow them to.
Well, I think that was answered previously, that there was a new student to the district, they would be given those options.
Yeah, I realize it was answered previously, but even with the difficulty, we would allow it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any questions?
Debbie, this is Sherry. I had a question. I don't know if I'm booming or if you can hear me.
You're a little booming, but it's better to be too loud than too soft, so go ahead.
Oh, okay, sorry. I just have a question for the administrators. I know we as a board approved the plan for the students to transition in elementary back in July at fall break. And we also in July approved the plan of high school, middle school to transition at the end of the semester. I just wondered if some of the administrators could talk a little bit about why that was why that decision was recommended, and also if you know of any other districts that are, doing that differently.
Do I need to step up the mic more?
Sure, that's
right.
great. Sherry may be able to hear you better. I'm not sure how that's working.
I mean, as far as other districts go, I can't obviously necessarily answer that. What I will say, at least at the high school level, kind of goes into two pieces if you're looking at it. One, the curriculum, which we kind of talked about just a minute ago. When you're talking about Edgenuity, they've got 30 different electives that Edgenuity offers that we don't offer. These are all classes that students are now a month in. That is going to be a difficult transition if you're taking that class that we have no equivalent for in person. And then 2, you talk about as well as if you talk about scheduling at the high school level, we're going to end up having to need more staffing. We have 13 teachers assigned, as I mentioned earlier, to the virtual academy. Depending on how many more students transferred from the virtual academy to in-person, you are now going to worry about not only that average class size of 24, and I'll give you a few examples already. We got an intro to physics already at 26, 27, 25. We got health and PE classes that are around 27, 28. We got geometry, for example, 25 classes. In addition to that, we also have some CTE, AP, and dual credit classes. We've had to do blended learning in that way. So we've had some teachers that essentially have volunteered to kind of take on double duty. I'll use the CTE department as the easiest example. Edgenuity did not offer any of the CTE classes. I should say that very few of the CTE classes, and then furthermore, it had to have a CTE teacher in order for that to be in the career pathway. So they've done blended learning. Well, now depending upon which students from the virtual academy transfer in person and then what classes they need, we could put ourselves in a bind. I mean, if you're talking about science classes, for example, we've got an AP Bio with 36 students in there. That's a blended learning class. Science requires a certain certification in order to teach you whether live or physical sciences. If you're looking at a foods class, for example, which is blended learning, has 35, 21 of those are in person. Same boat. Then on top of that, do you hire a teacher, and then can you find one if you only need one more class of culinary? We're not likely to find somebody that's going to teach culinary for one class during that time. So now you're either going to, one, put that cap size over, which is going to be extremely difficult, and I'll use foods class just because it's an easy example, where you're trying to clean all the equipment, minimize the amount of interaction because they can't work in groups, and we only have one foods lab. So I can go on and on with several different examples like that. I mean, again, sciences and a lot of the CTE classes are the easiest examples. And then again, I'll say that too, with regards to the pacing, we're already a month, by the time we start on the 28th, we're already going to be a month in. Is it possible? Yeah, it's possible. Is it going to be extremely difficult? I think so, especially when you're talking about the curriculum transition from going from one completely different platform to another. So hopefully that addresses the question. But
I actually have a follow-up on that, Mr. Howe.
Yes, ma'am.
So on those classes that are unique, like the AP class or a dual credit class, when we go back after Christmas break, if there are more students than the cap that sign up for that need that class, where are we going to hold classes of that size?
It's a good question, but I think the more time that we have to plan, the better. I mean, when you think about high school schedules, that's usually done in around the March, April timeframe. And then usually in around May or June, essentially you've had 2 or 3 months to plan. In this case, based on what you guys decide, it'd be a lot different than having a week.
No, I was thinking kind of down the road, not necessarily for August. I'm thinking when we come back after Christmas break.
Yeah, Jane.
Yeah. Do we need to start thinking now about securing larger spaces? And I've read about school or communities using a church so that they can have those bigger classes. Is that something that we need to start thinking about, given that we know we've got 400 kids that are in virtual instruction in the high school now that could opt back in, even if we extend that according to our plan, where would we put them?
Well, I think some of it would depend on what courses they're coming back into, because you're starting a fresh new set of courses after Christmas.
If he's got blended learning classes at 35 now,
right,
that it's not beyond the scope that they would be at 45 or 50, and I'm sure they have been before, but we didn't have to concern ourselves with social distancing.
And I think then what you'd have to look at is then you may have to adjust the courses that you're offering, and maybe you offer 2 sections of that instead of 1, and you forego maybe an elective that had been offered that maybe that teacher taught, so they pick up 2 sections, and you no longer offer this elective. So you have time to make those adjustments within the schedule based on who's coming back. We can also use this space if we have a larger class.
Sure.
So I think there's a greater opportunity to make adjustments if you have 2 to 3 months, or a month even, to be able to make some adjustments in the schedule.
Yeah, I understand your point. I was just thinking do we need to start looking at that now to have that eventuality met then?
But you're saying, like, even now, and we have had some time, we still have a class with 35 people.
Well, again, it's blended learning, so not all 35 are in person. So the way that's worked now, obviously, is we have a group of students, and again, I'll use the culinary class where we have 21 in-person students that have signed up, meaning that the other 14 are in the virtual academy. But because there was really no culinary class, that teachers decided to do.
So that's great, and that's and so they are getting. And I think, honestly, if that was more prevalent in our virtual program, we would have some concerns about it from parents. Are we using the gym? Are we using the cafeteria for classrooms? Are we, have,
They'll have PE in the gym, but the
well, I know, but,
cafeteria, you're not gonna be able to do much with the tables because of the plexiglass.
Correct.
but
And
you can still hold a class in there when you're not eating.
Well,
You just sit at a
one
place
space
instead of with a
we thought about
cafeteria
using
thing,
for like in the
there.
morning for chorus and stuff like that, where they can space out before it gets going. But you'd be
Yeah.
limited. The other thing I'll say too is seconds. You know, the second semester schedule obviously will look much different than what it does now, especially when we went to a 4x4 block. So again, as you guys know, will be a whole new set of classes. Some of those core content classes will still be offered, but a lot of the electives will look a little bit different. Mr. Hawkins' point, we'll have a little bit more freedom with regards to how many sections we may offer as the counselors look at those numbers.
I will just tell you anecdotally what I've heard from a few parents, and again, it's a very small sample. Their kids are taking electivity on ingenuity. They plan to take their hardcore classes in the spring because they assume they'll be that. Intro to physics, things like that. They don't want that. They want it here, so they use up all their electives this first semester on ingenuity, so I can see a demand for those more in the second semester. For the hard, for the more core. All right.
I'm not sure that we answered all of the questions that Ms. Frigley asked.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sherry, go ahead. Did you get your answer? Do you want more? Sherry? Do we have the phone?
Yeah. Sherry, did you get your question answered?
Yes, and I would just say in closing, it just sounds like everything is, of course, as we all know, extremely complicated, ever-changing. And I would say that I really, really appreciate all the administrators and the teachers and the staff, the parents and the students, just everyone really doing the best that they can with the situation. And it sounds like you all are making adjustments almost on a daily basis, trying to figure out, is this working? Is this not working? What can we do? How can we, help with this situation? And I just want to say you're greatly appreciated. Thank you all so much.
I have a follow-up question for you.
Yes, sir.
You indicated if too many students come back, all of the horrible negative things that would happen regarding staffing, resources, that type of thing. What about if 9 or 10, 15 kids wanted to come back that had special circumstances? Surely you could allow that many, couldn't you?
What are the special circumstances you're referring to?
Well, if 10 or 15 students wanted to come back, the virtual wasn't working for them. That wouldn't require additional resources or staffing, would it?
Well, I think it'd be the same point when we talk about if someone came into the district new. If you're talking about a small number, and I'm assuming the transfer rate is pretty small, at least from what I understand in Woodford County. But if you open up the door to where you're talking about 100 or 100, again, I have no clue. I think that's where it gets pretty scary.
Yeah, you're talking 100, 150, but if it was a minimal number of children or students who wanted to go, those dire circumstances probably wouldn't kick in, would they?
If it was a minimal number, I would probably say no.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? I think Mr. Asher had kind of yielded his time. Do we have any more questions for Mr. Asher?
The only other one on the elementary front. So if we have students that have to quarantine, will they go into the virtual academy or do NTI?
No, they would do NTI. They would do, and we kind of compared it to if a student had mono and they were out for an extended amount of time. The teacher would supply the work, probably at a week's time or several days at a time. And one thing I've thought of, we've gotten so much more comfortable in terms of pushing out assignments virtually, via their Chromebooks that they'll have, or meeting with that student, perhaps after school, or scheduling 30 minutes with that student. But no, would not go over into the virtual academy.
Okay, and are the virtual teachers going to try and maintain the same pace as the in-person, so that if a kid chooses to switch to virtual, at some point it's roughly the same thing, or is that?
That is our intent. Now, the two modes are going to look different. All the logistics involved with in-person as compared to virtual. But one of the things we've emphasized for the elementary, now that we're combining, is keep doing what we've been doing. It's worked well. And when in doubt, and I've mentioned this in here before, some work we did in late July is when we identified those essential skills and standards. When in doubt, refer to those, and that's the focus, whether you're in person or virtual. And that was the reason we did that work.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna have one more quick thing. So we
Sure.
have home health teachers, which we've always had. Kind of.
Like home,
So we're still
home
having
hospital, that may be an option, yes, for extended.
Because they're not gonna probably be going out into homes this month.
I don't believe that they are
can't.
able to, no.
So will they be filling in with virtual, or how will they be utilized?
That would be one of the ways that they would use to be used to facilitate getting that work to the student, just setting up,
So that's
organizing.
another resource we have that won't be doing their normal job.
Yes, and if there's, Mr. Wells, anything to add beyond that? That's Garrett's department, sorry. I don't want to misspeak.
Yes, so the regulation was changed back in the spring to allow for home hospital visits to occur differently outside of the home. It could be virtual, it could even be a phone conference, so there are other ways in which to meet those needs. Yes.
But will they, I mean, I guess kids are gonna be staying home for reasons other than COVID. Because he's just, like if they're quarantined for COVID, they're gonna kind of be with their regular teacher with NTI. So these people, the regular broken leg, whatever, I guess, but home health seems like they could help.
It could be an infinite number of reasons.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that's another resource that we could pull in.
It is another resource. It could be COVID related, it could be the more traditional broken bone like you referenced. So, but yes, home hospital is available to help meet those needs.
And that's again, employees that are experienced with this kind of thing.
Yes.
How many of those do we have here?
How many home hospital teachers?
Mm-hmm.
We had 2 part-time teachers last year for several years, and 1 retired, so we now have 1 full-time home hospital teacher, and we also have a pool of home hospital subs to a couple that can help out as needed.
All right. If there's no more questions, we'll do the rest of our public comment. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
There were no more? Okay. Then we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is
we will not need to do item A tonight. Obviously, with Mr. Martello starting, we will have to get treasurer's fidelity bond for him. That paperwork completed as of yet. So once it's done, we will get that
on the agenda.
On an agenda. Yes.
Probably will be next week then?
I'm not sure if it'll be next week or if it'll be in October, but we're working through that process right now.
Okay, great. Award bid for district-wide cleaning services?
What else do you want?
So as we've alluded to in the past, we would recommend that we partner with a company to come in and do some disinfecting, some sanitizing in the evenings for 2 reasons. One, that allows us to take our current staff of custodians and move them all to the day. So we could have extra support from our custodial staff to do cleaning throughout the day. And then have a company come in at night, do the spraying, do the sanitizing of the building of the high-touch areas, the desks, the doorknobs, the handrails, other high-touch areas. So we went through a bidding process, and as a result of that process, I would recommend awarding that bid to Bluegrass Sanitizing.
And what does the cost come in?
It is between $2,000 and $3,000 daily. I don't remember the exact figure. It was 2 something.
And that's every school, every day?
Well, that cost would be every school, the bus garage, and central office if we went that. So that cost includes all of those locations.
And that's $40,000 a month.
It was about $2,800, I believe. That was the best bid. And as we have discussed this, and I know we've talked about the cleaning before, if we believe it would probably take in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 custodians, additional custodians to do that. And so you would hire them in full-time positions to be able to do that level of cleaning. You would also have to buy the supplies and the equipment for them to utilize. The good thing about contracting out too is they only clean when we're in school. So when we're out for fall break, they're not cleaning. They may come in on that Sunday night before we come back on the Monday.
As opposed to Friday, because they wouldn't need to come back.
Correct.
Yeah, so that is one of the big benefits as opposed to hiring additional staff, which then we're under contract. And let's say we do have to close down for a few weeks because of COVID. Well, then the company that we work with, and they're not cleaning. We're not paying for that service. Whereas if we contract with employees, we've got those employees under contract for the duration of the fiscal year at least.
And I was looking to see on the financial summary where we're at on the CARES money.
That was the other thing. We believe that we would utilize basically the rest of our CARES money for that. I think that would be a good use of those funds. It may not cover it all, depending on how many days, but I think it would cover a good chunk of it. And again, I think the one thing that it would do, because of the chemicals that they utilize, we are ensuring that there is no virus when people come in the morning. And I think that's important. And to be able to do it on a nightly basis, I think would give our staff, our students, our parents a sense of assurance that we are doing everything we can to ensure that our buildings are sanitized and disinfected before kids arrive each day.
And how long is the contract?
We had talked about doing it, again, it would just be on the days that we need it. But as far as the duration, we talked about doing it the remainder of the semester and then revisiting at that point.
What is the scope of their activity when you say cleaning?
It would be disinfecting and sanitizing. So it wouldn't be taking out the trash. It wouldn't be picking things up. It wouldn't be scrubbing. It would be spraying a disinfectant with an electrostatic sprayer on tables, desks, doorknobs, handrails, really any high-touch area they can spray the plexiglass that we have in the buildings as well. So high-touch areas, spraying.
What about the buses? Will they do that too?
They could. What we've talked about so far was just doing the facility itself. That is something that they could potentially do.
Who's cleaning the bus?
The
staff.
Yes, we can utilizing the sprayers. Obviously, it has to be done either after a route is complete or between routes. So they would be cleaning the seats on those buses. Our own staff would, but this is to do it in the evenings each night. And again, this covers every building in the district.
And it's, they can work and be spraying this while our nighttime custodians are there working.
So again, we want to move our nighttime custodians to the day.
So there's nobody in the schools working while they're doing
We might stagger their schedules. I mean, there might be some, like all the custodians that we move to the day, they may not all come in at 7. Like we may stagger so there's some, like someone comes in first and then throughout the day they're coming in. But yeah, they could potentially be working very late at night to get everything done.
Okay. So the thought of having the regular custodians here during the day is to continue to clean throughout the day.
Provide more support throughout the day, yes.
Is our plan still to have the kids wipe down their own desks?
Yes.
So when you said that our COVID money would cover this, I feel like our COVID money is our COVID money covering the new staff?
Yeah. And again, I think we talked about that last time. That's a federal. I mean, we've spent in the neighborhood of $240,000, I believe, at this point. We'll have to
of the 483.
Of the 483.
Right.
So So we still have over $200,000 that we could apply toward this cost.
And so this extra staff, there may be some reimbursement for it, but we're not counting on it.
That's correct.
Have we done anything, and this is not really on this topic, but have we done anything about our ventilation?
I've had a couple of conversations with Russ Crawford, who has been the engineer that has worked with us on HVAC, and our HVAC technician has done some investigation on it. I mean, it's quite costly to do some upgrades to the ventilation system. We can certainly explore that a little bit more, but you're looking at several $100,000 to potentially look at that, and that may be something that should be done more as a summer type project, as opposed to trying to do it while we're in session.
Okay. We'll see how much we need by summer, hopefully, won't be as critical. All right. Any more questions for Garrett on this?
This is for the superintendent. When you were dealing with the professional who guides you or assists you regarding HVAC issues, what did he say about the ventilation in the high school being adequate during this COVID-19?
He hasn't come in and done any type of testing. I just asked him what types of systems are potentially being utilized for to improve ventilation based on COVID. And again, he said a lot of this is still very new.
So we haven't evaluated at all the ventilation in the high school regarding if it's adequate or not for COVID-related issues.
I don't know that we've done the ventilation in any building in terms of doing
Okay. So we've not done
an analysis.
We've not done a ventilation analysis in any building. Okay.
And on that too, I know, we kind of have competing interests. Over the last few years, we've thought so much about school safety, keeping those windows closed, keeping things shut down. Is that something that we're going to be able to do? Is keep our windows open when the weather's keeping the bus windows open, and because I do think that from what I've read, it is helpful to keep that ventilation flowing. So
we have some flexibility on the windows. The doors, we don't really have any.
And they don't, but at least the windows, because most of our schools are well windowed. I don't know about this school. I know there's rooms without windows, but.
I don't know that Ms. Fraser had said that even an oscillating fan in the classrooms is a benefit.
It can be, but I think a lot of that depends on if the door's open.
I asked that specifically, and she said not. She said that if any moving air, as long as it's not pointed directly on a fixed student for one time, is a benefit. That if it was in the corner and oscillating, that moving air kills the virus. So that may be something to think.
Sure.
This is a regular agenda item. We did not have a motion, though I believe we've had our discussion. Do we have a motion to award the bid for district-wide cleaning services?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I heard a motion by Ms. Bradley, a second by Ms. Springday. I'm going to call the roll since Sherry's not here. Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Ms. Richardson?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Springday?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Garrett. So the next item is discussion and potential action on extracurricular transportation protocol.
Yes, I sent you some information, I think a few weeks ago, concerning the recommendation from the Department of Public Health on transportation for extracurricular activities. And that recommendation is very different than the recommendation concerning how we are able to transport students to and from school. Transporting to and from school, you can have 2 students per seat as long as they are in a mask. And the transportation recommendation for extracurriculars is the social distancing. guidance that was initially introduced concerning bus transportation, which just in very simple terms, on a 78 passenger bus, we can get 13 students on that bus. And so consequently, we are either doubling or tripling the number of buses that we are taking to events at this point in time. And so I wanted to bring that to the board to see if there was a thought about making those two basically the same, or if you want us to continue doing what we're doing.
What's your recommendation?
Given the fact that we have asked many of our teams to try to keep their travel to an hour and a half or so or less, I do believe that we could follow the same protocol that we are following for normal student transportation. And really for many of our teams, even if, just as an example, let's say there are 30 kids and 3 coaches. You would have to take 3 buses for that. But even 30 students and 3 coaches on a 78 passenger bus, you can typically have only 1, maybe per seat. And so, you still may be every seat, but it has only 1 student on it. And so, yeah, I'm saying you're saying the recommendation now. Yeah. I'm saying if we were to follow the normal guide or the regular guidance for to and from school, you could get all 33 people on the bus and still have some distance. It wouldn't be spaced out like it is now, but so those are some extreme situations, but those are situations that we are encountering. And so I think it would be good to have the consistency in terms of the type of transportation that we are following.
So your recommendation,
extracurricular too, as the same as the other.
Your recommendation is to not follow the public health recommendations regarding transportation after school.
So
my recommendation is to follow the same guidance that they have allowed us to follow for transporting to and from school.
And I will say this is a puzzling thing. If we have a student that lives in Nunsuch, it's completely feasible to think that they're going to spend an hour on that bus in the morning, and they can sit side by side safely wearing a mask with another student. But an athlete doing the exact same thing on the exact same bus has to have more space to keep them safe. It's a conflicting guideline that it's just not consistent.
So this is Sherry. Can Grant weigh in?
Yes. Yes, please.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we have had that conversation with several school districts, several superintendents, and exactly what I think it was Danny that was just talking. That's exactly the conversation we've had. This guidance essentially makes no sense. The distinction they're drawing, these students can come to the school and do their stretches and warm-ups and scrimmaging without masks on at the point of competition, and then we put them on 4 buses to get them to competition 20 miles away, and then they're running around in warm-ups, elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder with no masks on. The guidance from the Department of Public Health simply makes no sense. And it seems to be a way that they are trying to discourage athletic participation without just expressly telling KHSAA to go stick it. So the guidance makes no sense. I think the recommendation that the superintendent wants to follow, or is recommending to you all, makes sense to us. It's logical. The Department of Public Health guidance, their statutory authority is to make recommendations of what is reasonably necessary to protect public health. And I've been listening for the past 3 weeks, and I've not heard anybody articulate why this is reasonably necessary to protect public health or student athletes.
Well, and Mr. Hawkins, you can speak to this, but didn't the guidelines start out for busing for our students, have this same thing, and then they learned from schools, hey, that's not feasible, and so they adjusted.
Within a week, the guidance changed. I think they realized there would be no way for us to get kids to school if that's the way that we had to do it.
So, Grant, if future Department of Health issues, if the superintendent and you believe their motives are not pure, that they're trying to stick it to somebody, then you would recommend that we ignore that recommendation?
It's not a matter of just ignoring the recommendation. It's weighing all the information we're getting from all of the varying sources, including conflicting information, and trying to make a reasonable and good faith decision based on all the information. It's the exact same analysis that I talked to you all about in relation to liability and immunity for damages actions if there were lawsuits. It is the same process. It is weighing all the information and trying to make a good faith decision in a legally uncertain environment.
So just to make sure, there's a guidance for bus riding from AFLA, from the Public Health Department, or KDE, or both?
Cabinet for Health.
Cabinet for Health and Human Services. There's a conflicting guidance from the same agency on bringing kids to and from school. These are the same agency with two conflicting, okay.
But they safer standard that they're proposing for athletes.
Right. A more onerous, but safer. Healthy at school applies to all bus riding. So anybody on our buses is going to have a mask. Athlete, kindergartner, coming from Nutsuch, whatever. And the other guidance for healthy at school was one person per seat, or two people per seat. And the seats were actually designed for 3. And I know that Mr. Hawkins and his staff are, committed to following the healthy at school. So hopefully all these athletes will have masks. And the other thing, I know we do have a policy that you can ride with your parents, or, so there are other ways to get to these athletic events.
It becomes logistically more challenging when you're talking about traveling to events. And it becomes really and more of an equity issue then, because the parents would not be able to transport to a facility. And so we believe it's still important to provide that transportation.
Sure, but I mean, if it was...
If a parent wanted to comply with that.
Yes, we have a policy that allows that, and even to take another child, I remember we had a waiver or something. So even if they didn't like the new crowded buses, they could, but they could, and it is an equity issue, but I think most parents go to it anyways. So, okay, I just want to clarify that thing.
I have a follow-up question for the superintendent. He said something I didn't understand. You said the health department changed the guidelines a week after they had made the guidelines on to school and from school, and they did that as retribution toward athletics?
No, I didn't say that.
What was the distinction about the week after?
I think they had gotten feedback from school districts saying that would be feasibly impossible.
No, I'm talking about
students to and from school.
But did you make reference they changed the guidelines for athletics?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
No, for school they changed it.
Gotcha.
And Dr. Stack.
They changed it for schools, but not athletics.
They changed
not
it from to and from school transportation. Not the extracurricular came out several weeks after that.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, at the time that they changed the to and from school rules, extracurriculars were not even on the table yet. Nothing had reopened as far as that. The 1K SBA publication, the rules were changing so rapidly that KSBA's magazine had one rule articulated on one page and a different rule articulated on a different page from 2 different sources because things were changing so quickly. But that was long before KHSAA had voted to allow athletics, so athletic transportation wasn't even on the table yet when that change was made.
Okay. Is there any further questions? We still, does anybody want to make a motion on this?
I will. I will move that we follow the same guidance and safety standards for athletic competitions travel as we do for students being transported to and from school.
You may want to make that extracurricular.
Okay,
That way it's not.
that's true. Absolutely.
So we have the, okay. I have a motion and a second. Motion by Ms. Bradley, a second by Ms. Springate. Any further discussion? All right, let's vote. Mr. Wilson?
No.
Ms. Richardson?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Springate?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. The motion passes 4-1. Okay. Item D, discussion and possible action on timing and logistics concerning reentry. We've had a lot of discussion on this. I want everyone to stay and to be able to get the answers they want, but I hope we can stay on one subject till it's resolved. That's my only guide. I hope. This is Ms. Evelyn and Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson, I'll let you.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I think it's beyond dispute that many of our students made a good faith decision to sign up for virtual or in person. You have to admit, I would think, that their decision was based on what they thought was best for themselves. But they did it, from the people I have heard, and hopefully I'm not the only person that's heard this, but they did it without truly understanding without understanding all of the aspects of virtual learning. Many have told me they made the decision based on what virtual experience they had last year, which I think is understandable. The Ingenuity platform is completely different than what we did last year. And some students are struggling. The same things that the superintendent told us over and over again about the advantages of in-person instruction and why we needed to do it apply to these students also. I was walking in Midway by myself Saturday. Walked through town. A grandmother saw me walking. She tried to stop me. I didn't hear her. I kept walking. And when I reached the corner grocery, she was behind me in her car flashing her lights on me and asked me to stop. So we went into the parking lot of the corner grocery. And she explained to me the horrible dilemma that her grandson was in about adjusting to virtual instruction. Struggling, horribly struggling. The same thing that the superintendent has explained about depression. Wants to be with his other students, is not learning. Is there any way that you can help me to help my grandson, to allow him to get back in the classroom with his students, with his teachers, with his principals, with his counselors, so that he can learn and feel good about himself? I promised her that I would discuss this on Monday. I assure you, this is not the only person who has reached out to me. I think if you look at 133 elementary students wanted to go in person from virtual, says a lot of the same thing. not every one of those 133, but many of them. At the last meeting, the public discussion was profoundly talking about this same issue. And it is beyond me why we wouldn't show compassion, show grace to these students. It's just beyond me. And I think that I personally believe that it's in, Ms. Springate brought up earlier, we approved the dates for virtual. We approved changes in virtual. And I still believe that we have the same ability to approve changes now. It makes no sense to me why we can do it before, but now we can't. And to just say to these folks, sorry, you made a choice. You had an opportunity. Too bad it's not working for you. Tough it out until the end of the semester, and we'll see what we can do then. I just don't think that is the way that we should treat our students. And I'd be interested to hear if anybody else has any comments.
I'd like to say something. Can you hear me? I know at last month's meeting, Scott, you made a passionate plea. It was probably the most passionate plea I've heard you make since I've been on the board. But you said our children are suffering. They need to be back in school. Every single child. The high school, the middle school, the elementaries. This is me saying that they need to be back in. They are suffering. I have talked to parents who, their grown sons, these are high schools. I have a 17-year-old son. And I know that the men in here can agree, a 17-year-old boy doesn't break down emotionally unless it's bad. And they don't break down emotionally every day unless it's bad. Sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day, listening to a virtual instruction, watching a video and then answering questions, and then watching another video and answering questions, and watching another video and answering questions. I hate to be repetitive about this, but that's what they do. I've sat and watched my son in virtual school lay on the couch with a computer in front of his face. He watches a 2-minute video, and then he answers questions. And then he watches a 13-minute video, and he answers questions. He's miserable. These children are miserable. It is affecting them emotionally, mentally, physically. It's affecting families. If we don't give them the same opportunity, and they're not all going to take that opportunity. I don't disagree that it is working well for some people. But if we say, we made these decisions hastily as well. We've changed our mind 3 times, like Debbie said, because we didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. If we say you can't come back until January, how many kids are we going to lose? Not only mentally, but we're taking a chance with their emotional well-being. We're taking a huge chance. All because it's going to be a tough transition, because we're going to have to work harder to do it. I think that is absolutely a slap in the face to every child in the high school and the middle school that is not getting the same opportunity. And it is as well to the parents who are taxpayers in this community, who are being basically discriminated against because their child has a more difficult schedule. It's not fair. It's not right. I've spoken to parents who have spoken to attorneys who say that if their child is not welcome back in the school as an in-person student because they chose virtual, but elementary kids are, they will file a lawsuit. I've also spoken to parents who said, what if I withdraw my kid and say, I'm going to homeschool them 3 days later, hey, homeschool didn't work for us, re-enroll. What do we do then? And that, those are great points. I appreciate that. But to see these kids that can't get out of their house during the day because they're trying to keep up with their learning, they're trying to keep up with the progress, it's the most disheartening thing I've ever seen. We have to give these kids a chance. And if we don't, I can't even fathom a person who would say, no, you cannot come back to in-school learning. You have to suffer until January. That is a very long time. October, November, December, we're going through the holidays where some kids are meeting, Christmas without the same Christmas they've always had because of the pandemic. Our teachers, our schools are what they need.
Ms. Richardson is absolutely correct about the passion that the superintendent has used about getting our kids back in school. It's not virtual education, is not working, he said. They're depressed. They need to be back in school. Mr. Superintendent, there's other people out there just like that right now. What do you say to them?
Are you asking me to respond?
Yes, sir.
I certainly understand the concern that many people may have with the virtual instruction and the desire to come back in person. I think we said, and you referenced this, that many thought it was going to be like it was in the spring. And we said time and time and time again, this will not be like NTI. This will be very different. We provided information on Ingenuity. I know the high school sent out information. I know the middle school sent out information on what to expect. We sent out links so that people would have the opportunity to go and to see it for themselves. I think when you look at a couple of things, number one, I think we were clear up front when we said, if you choose virtual, please know this will be until Christmas, until the semester break. We said that, and we said it on multiple occasions. We said that elementary would have the opportunity at a break to make a change. That was the plan from the beginning of July all the way until today. We have not changed. We have not changed our mind. We haven't changed our stance. Can we make the virtual academy better? Yes, and we will. And we'll continue to work. We've made adjustments since the beginning. However, I also think you have to look at, if you were to open it up, set aside the transition piece. Can we handle it from a staffing standpoint? Can we do that at the middle and high school? We can't. If we had 100 kids choose to come back at the high school from virtual into in-person, we could not staff that. We couldn't find teachers right now to staff that. So what do? Do we put 35 kids in a classroom and put them on top of each other? Is that fair? Is that fair to those who chose in person from the beginning? I don't think that's fair either. And so I think you have to look at this because it is a complicated issue. It's much easier to find elementary teachers now. We knew that. That was part of the planning process. But when you get into September, October, and you want to find a high school science teacher, you're not going to find one. And so I think you have to look at all pieces of it. But I think the other thing is, and I heard from many parents when they had to make the decision, who said, I'm going to choose in person because it gives me the most flexibility on what I'm choosing. And many people did that. And so while I understand the concern, and our goal is to try to make this the best experience we can make it, and we will continue to work to improve it. But if someone thought that this was going to be like it was NTI in May, I'm sorry, we were very clear all along that this was not going to be NTI. This was going to be initial credits. And I'll go back to when we talked about using the Edgenuity platform, you talked about the positive experience from a parent who took the class along with their own child. And I know it was an elective. It's still the same concept. It's still the same idea. And so, again, we tried to utilize a platform that has been proven to be successful. We've used it in our district for a number of years. So, again, this is not an easy one. It's not. But I also think, can we provide the opportunities for the in-person if many students were to pick that? I don't think we could.
I think one of the questions that I'm hearing.
Ms. Bradley, can I have a follow-up to my question, please? The answer is, we told you at the beginning, you had an opportunity. It would be difficult to do, and some parents thought outside the box a little better than you did and chose a flexible. What do you tell the student who is struggling, who is crying, who is depressed, who can't get it, who desperately wants to come back to class? What do you tell that student?
That we want to work with them. That we can do some individual meetings with them. There may be some opportunities where they could come in after school and get some additional tutoring. We can do some small groups, and we can look at some after school opportunities for some additional help. We have a counselor that is assigned to the virtual academy at the high school. And I know both of our counselors work with the virtual students at the middle school. We want to provide that support. So we will do everything we can to help that student be successful in the virtual program.
But and then I'll turn the floor over to Ms. Bradley, but I want to clearly understand, you will do whatever you can to help, with the exception of allowing those students to return to school.
My recommendation, and if the decision is left to me, that we would follow the plan that we have in place.
My question is, you will do your best to make virtual better, but you will not allow someone who is in middle or high school who chose virtual to come back before next semester.
We will follow the plan that we have in place. Is that what the plan says, Mr. Wilson?
So if a parent comes to you pleading, the grace that they will be shown is, we're sticking to the plan.
I will talk with that parent, and I will try to help them find the resources that we can provide for them. I've had those phone calls.
Will you allow the student to return to class?
We will follow the plan that we put in place.
Ms. Bradley.
I think there's a couple of questions. One is, when we were making the decision on how to roll this out, we asked multiple times, will online students be getting the same instruction as in-person online students? And I think the answer was yes, except a few minor tweaks at the high school level. Because we asked it more than one time, and because there was some thought that parents should elect in-person online because they would get more access to a Woodford County teacher, and we said that was not the case, and that there would be minor differences. I think that's one concern that parents have, is it now looks like it's not just some minor differences, it's staying with that same framework and different kind of blended opportunities, and you've had to tweak things for dual credit and AP, and I understand those changes have to be made. I'm just saying I think that's part of the breakdown with what the community expected it would look like and what it has had to evolve to look like. I think that is an opportunity that we could have made clear. And I do think that saying that some parents chose that knowing that it gave them more flexibility sounds a bit punitive. And I don't think that's your intention.
No, I'm just saying that's what parents told me.
But I think it sounds a bit punitive for those parents that looked at the case rates at that moment and made their decision. And now, thank goodness, our case rates are so much better than they were when that decision was made. I think that's what families are struggling with, is a different set of circumstances, which was the same impetus for our change as what they would like to have. And I understand on the flip side of that, this is gonna, if we did change that, if it's even within our purview to change it after Mr. Chenoweth's comments, then we have to think about the health and safety of our teachers in classrooms with way more people than what we expected, and the health and safety of our kids in those same classrooms with more kids than what we expected. I worry about if we're going to just be pushing them into a small space that doesn't even allow for any social distancing.
Like a school bus with 2 kids in 1 seat.
That's fair. There's no easy answer on this one.
As far as the communication, I don't recall that conversation. I know that the high school communicated very early on that there was going to be a distinct difference between the two. And I will say, at the time that we sent the survey out for the decision, at that time, the cases were such that we were coming back in person and virtual on August 26th. Because we asked for that decision toward the end of July, because we had to have the numbers in time to be able to plan accordingly from a staffing standpoint. And so when that plan was introduced, I believe it was either July 6th or 7th, we went through it at that point in time. We talked about when we would do the survey. And so at the time the decision was being made, we were coming back to school in person and online on August 26th.
Ms. Springate, did you have anything?
No, I would just say that I appreciate Mr. Chenoweth's comments, and it gives us a good understanding about the distinction and difference of where our authority ends and the authority of the administration begins. And I also think it's important to really realize that people are struggling. This has not been an easy decision for anyone. And I feel like, if we can be as flexible as possible at school with, assisting parents with resources, counseling, social work, tutoring, the small groups, anything that we're able to do following the Healthy at School guidelines, I really appreciate that. And, I don't know if we can put something up on the website that just kind of directs parents, if your child is struggling with, mental health or with depression or with, these things, here's the point of contact, or here are some resources in the community, that kind of thing. I really appreciate when we do that, Mr. Hawkins, so thank you.
Ms. Ealing, can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
Mr. Hawkins had said that it was, that there's an equity issue with sports, with, parents attending games, taking their kids to the games. I just want to stress that it's an equity issue for the kids who aren't allowed to return back to school as well. And when you make a difference in one group and the other, and stress that it's an equity issue for one group and it's not for another, I think that's a problem. And I just want to make sure that the public who's watching right now understands that several of us on the board I'm not speaking for anyone but myself, but I feel like several of us on the board are fighting to get those kids back in school, the high school and the middle schoolers who chose virtual academy. Mr. Hawkins has said that he will stick to the plan that is in place. So I encourage our community, when they want to reach out, they reach out to Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you. Alice, can I have a quick question for Allison, because she said, and McPiper, Ms. McCown, your son is signed up for virtual?
Yes.
Has he had contact with his high school teachers?
He has had contact with his teacher, with his advisor. He has an advisor. There's no actual content that you're with a teacher. So, and she's wonderful. She goes above and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
But it is very limited contact. And, I'm sure that she has several students that she has to stay in contact with. So he's in the middle of an assignment and he has a question for her. You have to email, and she gets back as soon as she can, but sometimes that's hours. It could be dinner time after he's spent 8 hours in front of the computer already. To suggest that he comes in after school hours is completely unfair after he's already spent all day long, and then he's going to come in and get some special, oh, we're going to do you a favor. I think that's ridiculous, quite honestly. And he does spend hours by himself every single day looking at that computer. I've seen a marked difference in him. I've seen a marked difference in his friends. And, it's sad. He looks forward to the afternoon when he does tech school, because he is in a virtual classroom and he has communication with human beings.
So he's virtual all day, it's just different?
Ty is virtual in the morning, and then he does tech school in the afternoon with Fayette County.
But he has his actual Fayette County teacher?
He does, yes. He has one virtual academy class.
And you are in person?
Mm-hmm. I'm in person.
So what is and do you have contact with your teachers as an in-person enrollee?
Yes. My schedule's a little different since I'm a senior and there's, co-op and I'm dual enrolled and everything.
But as far as your actual classes?
Yeah. The only class I have this semester, I feel like this is important for me to say because, I can't really speak for people who have class. My only class through the high school is co-op. So for this semester.
So you don't like a math class?
Right. That'll be next semester since we're doing the 4x4 thing. But I'm able to communicate with her.
Is she teaching them? Well, co-op, I guess.
Co-op is different.
Hard to get.
Yes.
I understand that.
But
okay.
With the in-person, she emails us frequently. She uses the Schoology platform to, assign us our weekly assignments. And then we have Google Meets every 2 weeks on Mondays.
And this is something, he has an advisor, but no Schoology or, okay. So there's, even though it's kind of hard to compare.
Yeah,
it's just interesting to me to see right now what the difference is. And I also want to say, we have asked about what virtual kids, I've been particularly concerned about them. There are some kids that want to come back, what we're discussing now. There are kids who cannot. They want to. They're sick. They can't. Grandma's sick. They cannot. And what is their experience going to be? And I think we have talked about that for the last several months. I'm sure it's improving. It's working for Danny. It's not working for Allison, but we were told in a meeting, I asked point blank because I've been very concerned about this. And we were told that except for a few tweaks in the high school, these kids were getting the same thing. And that was probably a month or so ago in meetings, and it's just not materialized.
It was the same meeting that we said the high schoolers had about 3 days left that they could reach out.
Yeah, we extended it for like 2 days. So
it was that same meeting that was what I heard as well.
So anyway, it's tough. I mean, it is a tough decision, but again, it's almost like if parents knew how to play the game. I get that sense, like, I had parents who were a little more savvy, paying a little bit more attention, and it was like, I'm signing up. When we gave the second opening, like, I'm seeing the writing on the wall. I'm signing up for in-person because otherwise I'm going to be stuck in virtual. And other parents just aren't that in tuned. And we don't want to set up a situation like that, or where you're coming to us from a different county that's been on a different platform, that's coming in as kind of out of sync anyway, and you get in, but someone else does that, like by circumstance. I know that Grant said this is not our role. I take that extremely seriously, that this is not a board decision, but it's hard for me to imagine that making sure that all of our children get an equitable education is not a top level board decision, and things flow from that standard. So, I mean, I don't even know for sure actually if we're going to have a motion or if we're going to vote on something. Grant, I don't know if Mr. Wilson or anybody came with an idea.
I think we need to listen to Grant again and let him expand on that, because he said he would have more thoughts.
Okay.
The issue that we have, the reason that the advice and decision-making in July is different than it is today, you had more options then than you do now, is that decisions that are made that early in the summer allowed the superintendent and principals flexibility on assignment of staff time, on the ability to transfer individuals if it was needed, involuntarily if it was needed to fill certain roles. But there are statutory deadlines that bind the superintendent's hands, that bind principals' hands, that prevent certain decisions from being changed later in the school year. In the summer, when we were or in the spring, when we were responding to the governor, essentially in a state of emergency, all of a sudden, all of that went out the window. But preparing for the fall, we had the opportunity to make some plans, make some decisions, to allow teachers to volunteer to do virtual versus in person, so that they could pick the role they wanted to play, and that was honored. I think we heard at your last meeting that nearly everyone who needed to be a virtual teacher was able to be honored, and most people who wanted to do that also was able to be honored. But we're beyond that deadline, we're beyond that statutory deadline, and we're not at a point where we're all being ordered to go home and everybody be virtual. So there are aspects of this that the superintendent's hands are tied, and if the board took it upon itself to try to, I'm not advising you not to make a motion, I'm not advising you not to take a vote, but you could be putting the superintendent in a position of either violating employees' contracts or essentially subverting the intent of the board as expressed through a motion and a vote, and puts him in a spot of not being able to honor all of his legal commitments if the board attempts to force his hand on something that the advice of our office is and has been this month, last month, that these are decisions now that are in the administration's hands. The summer planning is over, the summer planning happened, and now we have to allow the superintendent and principals to follow that course and do their best to implement what was handed to them over the summer.
What advice would you give? I mean, I will echo what Allison said. People have talked to me about attorneys as well. They consider this so inequitable that they'll do that. That is what they're thinking. They're so frustrated.
Yeah, I understand that.
So if we made a motion, let me just ask this.
Differently based on gender or based on race or based on economic levels, that's where the equity issues present legal issues. The mere fact that we've drawn a different decision, that elementary schools get a different change point or decision point than high school doesn't present a legal inequity, even though I understand what you're saying and the way that term is being used tonight. It doesn't cause me any significant legal heartburn over calling that an inequity, because it's not based on one of those protected categories or areas where we talk about race, religion, gender, or socioeconomic status.
And I
it
guess
is a logical and reasonable distinction that's drawn as to the explanation has been given as to why it was easy to allow that at the elementary level and why it would be difficult, though not impossible, to even try to honor it at the high school level. And that's all that rational basis, that reasonable basis for why we've drawn the distinction between middle versus, or middle and high school versus elementary, I think passes whatever legal smell test there might be.
I think the equity argument, and there's also equality, you know. It's more that this junior student isn't getting the same quality of education than this junior student. Simply because perhaps they have an illness that wouldn't let them come to school. And I know there's the Disability Act, and we don't need to get into the nuances of that or whether that would be triggered. Or because their parent made a decision at the end of July, thinking that continued with that decision even after we gave a second opening, because they watched a board meeting where it was specifically said there would be very little difference in the education except for a few tweaks. So it's not really I don't think they're thinking of the equality between, or the equity between middle school, elementary getting to choose again and middle and high not getting to choose again, but just that with their own peers, the quality they're getting and the access they're getting to their teachers and is just so starkly different. That's what I think they're thinking of.
Well, and Grant, this is Sherry. Just to follow up on that, I realize that the virtual academy is completely different than the in-person, and agree with Mr. Hawkins and advocated for us to have two choices so that parents could choose what works best for them based on their circumstances and their student circumstances. But I disagree that our virtual academy is inferior to anyone else's virtual academy. I do agree that virtual learning is different than in-person, that there are drawbacks, but I do believe that people, can weigh those, the drawbacks, the costs and benefits, and make that analysis on their own. But I guess my question is, even though those systems are different, and they absolutely are different, as long as we're following that plan that we agreed to as far as how much access people would have with a virtual teacher, if they would have a virtual teacher, what the virtual teacher's roles and responsibilities would be, and how much contact they would have with the students, and then the same thing with the in-person. Do you feel like that meets the legal requirement to have the two different options, which are different, but also that they are both the best that we can do with in-person, given the circumstances of COVID, and the best that we can do with virtual, given the circumstances with COVID? I guess that's my question. I know we use the term inequity and inequality, and sort of interchangeably, and they really aren't. And I understand that there's a legal difference in those terms and the way that some of the board members use those terms tonight. But my question to you is, if our virtual academy is, similar or better than the virtual academies that other schools are doing in Kentucky and in the nation and the world, and if we are doing exactly what we promised we would do as far as contact and that sort of thing, is there an issue that that's not, an adequate education?
Legally speaking, what we're looking at as your all's obligation under the Kentucky Constitution is to provide students with access to educational services that allows them to advance in the curriculum and to make adequate progress. The equity issue from the Kentucky Constitution standpoint, the Rose case from 30 plus years ago, it's addressed by the fact that everybody was given a choice. I know Ms. Evelyn just talked about students might have an illness or a disability or something. Those matters, just truly as she acknowledged, those all have to be dealt with separately. This isn't if students have a health or disability issue, they're being dealt with dealt with by the system, and they get individualized determinations as to what types of accommodations and exceptions are made for them, and that just can't be part of the board conversation tonight. That's dictated by federal law. But for everyone else, if you take those students out of the equation, both paths are allowing students to advance in the curriculum, to make equal progress through the curriculum based on a choice they made. The same, again, by the analogy the superintendent gave earlier, some students choose to go into the alternative school during normal times, pre-COVID times. Some students choose that alternative path toward graduation, that alternative path to earn credit, and that's still an equitable education under the ICW Constitution, because it's still allowing that student to make progress in the curriculum. And that's the issue, that as long as your virtual program that parents chose, based on all the information that was provided through the summer before that decision point, as long as the virtual program is allowing those students that chose it to advance in the curriculum, it's giving them the opportunity to advance in the curriculum, it satisfies your legal obligation to those students.
Well, I think it's, the minimum bar we always have is that we want to be legal. That's our minimum bar. I
appreciate that.
We pride ourselves, and we've had a lot of talk. It's as good as the county next to us. It's never been our bar either. Our bar is to be exemplary for all of our students. And, but I appreciate your good guidance on this, Grant. Thank you. But I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to some of the rest of my board members. So, all right.
Madam Chairperson, in the spirit of showing grace to our children who are struggling, and by living the words, working together, we will all get through this. I move that any middle or high school student who wishes to change their decision from virtual to in-person learning be allowed to do so on September 28, 2020, as long as they notify their building principal by the close of business Wednesday, September 21st.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Wilson and a second by Ms. Richardson. We'll go around the room. Mr. Wilson?
Can I make a statement first?
Yes, please. Is there any further discussion?
There would be no way that middle and high could come back on September 28th. It would be completely impossible. I'm not sure when we would be able to get them back in school if that was because we would have to get positions created. We would have to try to fill those positions, try to redo scheduling at both schools. It would not be feasible to begin on the 28th for middle and high.
Mr. Wilson, would you be willing to extend that date to October 12th, the Monday after that we return back from fall break for the middle and the high school students?
Yes.
I don't know if that's possible either.
What date would be possible?
I don't know, because we would have to have a board meeting to approve new positions. We would have to then fill positions. We would have to redo schedules at both schools. I don't know. I'm thinking at least the 19th of October, at least. And that would be as optimistic as I could be.
This is Sherry. Just so I'm clear, are we talking about allowing no one to return in person? No one at all. The people that were set to return on the 28th September would not need to come back at all under this new motion until maybe the middle of October or later?
We could continue forward with the elementary, but middle and high could not start back in person.
I guess the question.
Is that true? Is that what you're envisioning, Mr. Wilson, or just let the virtual come in a couple of weeks later after the rest of them?
I would be willing to amend my motion to October 12th.
Just for the virtual students, but everybody else still remains?
This does not affect in any way students coming back on the 28th as previously planned. This just addresses those virtual students who would like to come back on the 28th also. has nothing to do with classes starting on the 28th.
This is Sherry. Mr. Hawkins, could you please address that? Because what I'm hearing is everybody's schedule would have to be redone. We would have to have new teachers at the middle school and high school. And so you couldn't just add in a teacher who could just take, 20 virtual students coming back. You would have to add in different teachers for different classes with different certifications. If you could just let us know before we vote on this, because what I'm hearing you say and Mr. Chenoweth say is different than what I'm hearing Mr. Wilson say.
It would cause us to have to redo a number of schedules. I have no idea what we would have to be looking at as far as teachers and certifications. Keep in mind that we have, after the first week, we have fall break. If we want to try to do, again, I'm just trying to think through the logistics of what it might entail at both of those schools. And to ask our people to do what would be required would be extensive. And again, because if I'm just trying to envision how we make it work, and I don't.
This is Sherry again, Mr. Hawkins. What if our numbers are up at 80-90% of students, all students returning? Could anybody return if we had numbers that high? I mean, I'm just not clear on. I think there are a lot of unintended consequences of this motion, and I don't want to vote on anything until we kind of talk through some of this. It sounds like what Mr. Chenoweth was saying was that you already have the staffing, you already have the hires, you already have the formulas, you already have the schedules, and we're on track for everyone who every parent and student who put down they wanted to return in person to be able to do that on the 28th. Currently, as a situation, if we stick to the plan that we approved back in July. And it sounds to me like that won't, if we make it another decision tonight.
Again, it would be, Mr. Howell, I don't know if you want to talk about from the scheduling standpoint, what.
I mean, I guess I can give kind of a quick rundown. I mean, when you think about when we changed the 4x4 schedule in late July, all three counselors were, I mean, it took them right up to the last minute. And again, if you've got students at the high school, schedules were out pretty late, and that was approximately 4 to 6 weeks. Obviously, it depends upon numbers, and I think that's, that kind of gets into what I was addressing earlier. Depends upon then what classes that these certain students are wanting to transition over. And then obviously, then finding the teachers to fill those spots if we are still wanting to keep those class sizes lower. And I'll say this too, that was with, and I guess I kind of want to reiterate, it's not that it's a lack of concern.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone can hear you. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No worries.
I'll try again. I was saying, I guess kind of repeat, I was saying that when we had changed the 4x4 schedule in late July, any student or parent of a high school student knows that we didn't have schedules out till pretty late. That was with the counselors literally working sometimes till midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm seeing some head nod no, and shout out to the counselors because we have 3 fantastic counselors. Anyway, that was approximately 4 to 6 weeks to get that working. And I'm not exaggerating here, literally all hours of the night. Then, depending upon what students are coming over from Virtual Academy and the number, to then find those teachers to fill those spots, that is a pretty lengthy process. If you were to ask me a deadline, I guess I can't tell you either. I don't know. A lot of it depends upon what teachers apply and what certifications we're needing, what classes then are we putting kids into. It wouldn't be something we can answer until it was set in front of me, but I can tell you the process, at least going from late July, and give you kind of a quick rundown of what that looked like, at least what we experienced.
I think the other question would be, what happens if we can't find teachers? What do we do then? I mean, if we need a science teacher and there are none, if we need an English teacher and there are none, what do we do then?
Is there value in reaching out and finding out how many students would do this before?
I think as soon as you put that open, then the expectation would be that we're going to allow it.
You see my question?
Oh, I do, but I do think that if you say we're gauging, the expectation is that that's what's going to happen. And again, I know what it was like for these two folks to find 5 teachers right before school started. To try to find several more now, I don't know that we would have it.
So other schools that are doing this with the numbers that we have, are they doing the hybrid? Is that how it's working with keeping their class sizes smaller?
I mean, we're at about 67, 68% of our back in person.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to match up with those who wanted to be virtual and meet those needs.
I'm sorry, I was asking, like, if we did extend that option, is that how other schools that have a higher percentage returning?
I mean, personally, I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about other districts, I guess I can speculate on a few things. I'd rather not do that, but I can't say for certain person.
Okay.
I mean, I did have, just randomly, had a conversation with someone from Anderson County yesterday that I met at an art fair, but they are, they haven't hired anyone new. She was very jealous of us. They are going to go, you could go virtual, you could go 5 days a week. They also have a hybrid for their elementary. They have kind of what they call a hybrid for high school where like you could just maybe go first and second period. I know that we've been told that's just not workable for us, but you know, at least the kids in a room and with his computers a little bit of the day. You know, for high school she said it was every day because you can't really go every other day. Because they have the classes every day. So people are, you know, doing different things. It's probably worth looking, but we're at the end of the deadline here. I really feel like I understand the logistics of this, but I also understand so much that our virtual program, and it's never going to be as good. It's just not. But that we keep hearing it's going to, you know, improve. And the biggest fear for me is the kids academically, obviously, but also their mental state. It's bad enough now. When their peers go back to school and they don't, they're going to feel even more left out. And we know kids, we know human beings. Out of sight, out of mind. Their friends are going to be busy at school doing all those great things, like I said last week. And we're going to have these kids at home who will have an advisor that they talk to once a week from our school, our family. And they're just not going to be part of our family anymore. And that just has not changed. And we were told, and parents were told, things would be the same except for a few tweaks in the high school. And weeks later, that has not really materialized. And so while I understand the logistics, I understand having to know numbers, I understand having to plan and to have a set fact and a set of numbers. 20 to 30% of our kids, I mean, it's just, they're our family. And we have not devised a system, and we just have to be clear about that. We have not devised a system for them to remain connected and part of our family. New ideas are coming up tonight, like come after school. I mean, that would be great. Don't go in the morning. Come after school. It doesn't, you know, but if we could expand our hours, then that's a burden on our staff too. And it's just so hard to think about all those kids who are part of our family really being left out there with a once or twice.
Madam Chair.
Anyway, go ahead.
if Miss Allison would agree, I'll withdraw my motion, put this on the agenda for the 28th, and I'll make my motion on the 28th. That would allow the superintendent time to think more about this and possibly come up with a way where individual students who are suffering could be shown grace and allowed to return to the classroom. That would give him time to think and give him the opportunity to come up with an idea of how you can address these very serious situations that we have. It shouldn't be an all or nothing.
I know, I just feel
It
like
just-
maybe some ways to have some creativity and halfway stuff. Okay.
Are you?
That's fine.
Okay. Will you put that on the agenda for next Monday?
Yes, sir. All right, I think we've had
I want to be clear. So we want to look at ways that we can re-engage students who may be struggling.
Then we can get them entered back in person.
Okay, so, and I guess I just want to be clear too. So the board is going to take action when the attorney has advised that this is an administrative decision.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you think that you can, during the week ahead, you could maybe ponder the possibility of allowing some folks to come back who are suffering?
So how do you pick and choose?
That's the problem.
Okay.
I wish we had time to actually have a meeting with these people who want to change. To have them, but we're socially distancing and all of that. But just with those, the Allison Richardsons and the rest of them.
I think too that we've heard from a very large amount of our community through email, through our public comments sections. We've heard, I can't even count how many.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a very high number, as well as parents on Facebook and, emailing us as a board. I think that we've definitely heard some pretty passionate pleas for their kids to be able to come back.
Sure. I have one quick question, and it's kind of a logistic thing. Maybe Mr. Howe can answer it. I had someone tell me that if you are in person and you choose to go virtual, that you have to start Edgenuity from the beginning. And this was actually from a teacher who asked to remain anonymous. That you would have to start Edgenuity from the beginning, and everything you had done with your in-person program would not be worth anything. Is that okay?
That has been one of the difficult pieces to balance the virtual academy and the in-person learning. And so originally we did say yes. We were trying to come up with a timeline of when you start class, and depending upon when you were asking to go into the virtual academy, how much of that course would you need to complete? What we ended up discussing and deciding upon is we would try to best replicate what they had learned in person. So I'll use a government class, for example. If they are in person learning the Constitution, the 3 branches of government, and then for whatever reason need to go to virtual academy, we would try to bypass those units that would represent that particular content and then let them finish the rest of Edgenuity covering the gaps in content that were not covered in person. So that was a conversation that was had. In fact, that was a conversation very recently, probably within the week. But that was not the final decision that we ended up making.
But if a kid had a in-person elective that wasn't on Edgenuity, do they just not get that credit?
Again, that's where it gets difficult. So
because we've said you could easily go from in-person to virtual.
So
what's the arrangement there? So parents really need to understand this before they make these decisions, these little nuances.
What you said is an excellent example of flexibility to help a student during a pandemic when things are unforeseen. It's an excellent example of showing the flexibility to help the student succeed.
For what it's worth, I think, and I know there may be some differences of opinions, obviously, but for what it's worth, I think we're all doing that.
Absolutely.
And we're trying to all,
Amen.
balance all of this, and
right.
what it looks like, and both in person and virtual, and neither one is perfect.
But the example you gave shows that it's not A or Z. It's not all or nothing. It shows that by working together, we can overcome these situations. And I appreciate your flexibility. I compliment you.
Thank you, Mr.
Just a couple of other logistic questions. We all the board members, and I don't know, Scott, if you were on the email or not, but we received an email from a bus driver saying that we were, help me, 10 drivers short. Was that the email? I believe it was 10 drivers short.
We have lost about 8 or 9 drivers from the past year. And so Kenny's working on the routing right now to make that, to try to make that happen based on the students who have signed up for in-person. And then, that's another complicating factor too, is that we would have to adjust bus routes as well. So we are working on that right now to try to make that work with the numbers that we have. We are still actively recruiting drivers because we can always use more bus drivers.
If we don't find any more bus drivers, are we prepared to open next Monday?
Pardon?
If we find no more bus drivers with our existing staff,
she is working on the route. I think she believes that we're going to be able to make that work because, again, based on the percentages of students who requested in person, and then those who requested transportation, that's what she's working through right now.
So we feel confident we can meet the needs.
I haven't seen final routing, so
if that. Will you know, how will we notify, how will we make the determination if we go or not go? We don't know if we have enough bus drivers yet.
Well, she's working on the routing right now, and I believe we will, she should be completed with that. And again, Kay is excellent at putting together a puzzle.
Absolutely. These bus drivers are excellent too, top notch. Did we get enough bus monitors hired?
I believe we've hired several subs and some full-time monitors. I'm not sure of the exact number, but we're trying to get every route covered.
What happens if we don't have a bus monitor for a bus? Does the bus go without it?
Yes, and we would take temperature then when the children get to school.
You, last question, Madam Chairperson. You sent an email keeping us in the loop about a situation at the football game. I've received no, maybe other, I don't think anybody has. We've received no further updates about that. Can you update us?
Well, I sent you an email this morning.
Okay.
So
what did it say?
It was a communication that had been sent to parents that there will be no varsity football activities this week. We're working with the health department on having students tested. Cassie has been a wonderful partner, and so that should be taking place later this week. As we get more information based on those results, then we'll make decisions moving forward about next steps that have to be taken.
If this had occurred next Friday, would those students have been allowed to attend class on Monday?
More than likely not. They would have been quarantined. They are quarantined now until they are able to test. So, no, they would.
What about the 6 bus drivers that transported the students? Would they have been quarantined also?
That would be a question for the health department.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question on update plan. Do we have a plan identified now that spells out specifically how many kids would need to quarantine and what rates we would get to? Or are you just going to stay in more of a flexible mindset on positive cases by class and quarantining and then school, rather than setting a threshold if there's 20 positive cases in the school?
yes, I mean, we will just be working hand in hand with the health department as we deal with cases that come up in the school.
Okay, and did you have any thoughts on the metric that Dr. Stack shared for schools? The red, yellow?
I mean, the cases per 100,000, I think has been something that we have been watching. I think it's a more probably consistent metric to utilize. I think the thing that is, and I think there is some flexibility in there too, and that you are able to look to see maybe where the cases are. And if that does impact the schools or if it doesn't impact the schools, and then you can make decisions accordingly.
Can we do a 5-minute break?
Sure, 5-minute break? Yes, we will recess for 5 minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
Where are you going here? Thank you.
So yeah, on average.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. So the way it works is they provide classes. They're advisory 5 days a week. So they're at least being for sure. In addition, we also have content sessions. So this is what we should one of the virtual administrator. So she's even small. She had one teacher with 12 students. And so it's essentially getting more for sure. It's also getting content as needed. They have a Bitmoji classroom, which I haven't learned myself, so where you can essentially have trouble with English, you have 4 English teachers, you can click on one of the English teachers and essentially set up a program, and then they work out that one to have that. We have that reverse. So,
Yeah, so.
I talk to them. But what I've asked the teachers on is responsible for 24 hours. That's kind of the guideline. They'll set up. No, in that sense, no. Now what I can say is.
You know, that there's no, just like a normal thing that we could just get everybody together.
Mrs. Ford just sent out, she's the first person ever.
Yeah,
she's boiled
so
up.
amazing, yeah.
So,
Really thinks about it.
yes. And so she just sent an email to the today talking about ways that we can get back in person. So we can enroll the students, at least make their part of the school. Yeah, I appreciate it.
But anyway.
I think we're ready to get back.
All right, let's read. Everybody ready to reconvene? All right. Okay, are we ready to get back together here? Sherry, are you with us?
Yeah, she is. She's shaking her head.
Okay. Now we're going to review our board agenda for next week. Mr. Hawkins?
Two discussion items.
Oh, well.
Do that afterwards?
Yeah, first we're going to review the board agenda for next week. That's what's next. Let's see. We have our treasurer's report first. Mr. Martello, welcome.
I'll probably go through it tonight.
Okay.
Since he just started last week.
Okay.
And I know we've got some other documents or some other information that we normally include up here that we'll get to. He's learning the nuances, but I mean, I'll be happy to go through any of the information with you. It's, we're a couple months into the fiscal year. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to try to address those.
Usually we have up here kind of the COVID count and money, and then the district,
it's the device insurance. Yeah.
Is the years
Not quite. I know that we tried to split that up pretty evenly between technology and food service, and I know that they have spent some money out of both of those, but I think there still may be some left.
So do you think by next week we can have that up there just for our review?
We will do our best, yes.
That's the goal?
Yes.
Okay. And then, let's see, consent agenda.
On the consent agenda, we have several donations this month. Most, I think all, but maybe one is monetary in nature. Certainly appreciate our community to continue supporting our different schools and organizations. Any questions on those? All right, for fundraisers, we do have some as we anticipate getting back in school. You'll see Huntertown has a couple Southside Library book fairs, middle school girls basketball, middle school football, high school cheerleading, high school softball, and high school journalism. Any questions on any of the fundraisers? All right, the next item are we don't have any travel requests this month again. Non-resident contracts, I believe we have one this month for your consideration. For item E, each year we have to put together a certified evaluation appeals committee. Dr. Jones heads this up. So those are the people that we are recommending. And this is usually a volunteer service. People volunteer. If there are more than one, then we usually do a vote to determine who will serve on that committee. They would hear any, if a certified employee wants to appeal their summative evaluation, then they would hear that appeal. Item F is to approve our home hospital health committee. Mr. Wells puts this together. These are the folks that review the home hospital applications that come in. Item G, we do have one hardship application, and we would recommend that you approve that. And then item H, ever so often we have one of these. This is for a student who went through a private kindergarten last year, so they did not attend what would be considered like an accredited type kindergarten. So they are coming into us as a first grader. We have to apply for that student to be advanced through the primary program so that we can receive funding for that student. And so again, what do we have? Maybe one every other year? Yeah. And typically it would be, sometimes you'll see it for a first grader in this kind of situation. Sometimes you see it for a kindergarten student who maybe is younger and wants to enroll. Any questions on anything related to the consent agenda? All right. Item A is the notification of personnel matters. That's everything that's taken place since the last board meeting. Item B is the notification of payment of bills.
On the item A, of the positions that were approved, how many have been filled?
Ryan, do you know how many of the 8, how many have been filled at this point?
The position?
The 8, yeah.
I believe 7 of 8.
Okay.
7 of 8.
I know that they began immediately. We posted them the very next day and they began to work on that. Item C is the board minutes from August 6th, August 24th. All were in attendance. And then item D is the approval of minutes from the August 17th board meeting. Item E is public comment. So I don't know what we wanted to discuss on that.
You put this on, and I think we're gonna, are you there?
I am here. I just put that on so that we could discuss the timeline for the public comment and see about possibly extending that. I know we've been getting a lot of comments that we have to start the meeting and the comments aren't in yet, which is an issue. And then we also get a lot of comments that come in, earlier in the day, which I think, we had been allowing for a while, and then all of a sudden we stopped allowing that. So I just wanted us to discuss that and really be consistent and just be as flexible and as open and welcoming as possible for the public to be able to comment.
I do want to clarify one thing on this without, getting into too much. I think that once it came to my attention and to other board members' attention, we did enforce the rules that had been publicized. I did hear from other people that actually people in the community were telling it was fine to go outside our guidelines. So I agree totally that we need to publish our guidelines, publish our rules, and stick to them for everybody, because some people were getting the message it was okay to go outside the guidelines, and others were following the rules. So we always do want to be consistent on that.
So are you gonna have a motion, or do you have a suggestion on new guidelines, or does anybody else have any changes they wanna make to our current public comment?
I would ask that we revisit having public comment at our regular board meeting and not require it at every planning meeting the way that we had for decades before.
Okay, I guess, so we have two different ideas here. I guess next week we're gonna need some motions. If you wanna come with a motion to exactly how they wanna amend this or change it, do we wanna have any further discussion on it now? Is that okay?
Yes.
So if you have a way you wanna change it, let's bring that next time, so we're ready to proceed on that. Anybody else want to just say anything about this before we move on? Okay, Mr. Asher, are you going to do this next?
I'll go ahead and just, I'll let Ryan chime in if he needs to. Obviously, this year is a little different in terms of graduation requirements. We have been contacted by a number of seniors who are completing their requirements at Christmas due to the 4x4. And right now we have an 8-semester requirement for diploma and also for the honors diploma. And so we are asking that you waive that for this year because, again, I think this is a very unique situation. And the fact that we have changed schedules, I don't anticipate staying on the 4x4 next year. But of course you can't ever predict, but this would be for the 2021 school year that we would allow students who meet those requirements, who finish all of their required credits, they earn the number of credits that are necessary for the regular diploma or for the honors diploma, that would be granted, and if they choose to do so at Christmas.
So basically, they're not just staying another semester to get the honors. When they've made the grade point, they've made all of the required classes.
Or any diploma. I mean, if they've earned their 26 credits and they've met all of their core requirements, their elective requirements, and they've earned that by the time we get to Christmas, that we would allow them to go ahead and graduate.
So is this a policy change for 1 year, or what's the mechanism of that?
It's a waiving that just eight semester requirement.
No policy change.
Correct.
Next month, next week to do that. Unusual times, show them grace, be flexible, be understanding to their needs. I'll be happy to make that motion next week.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about this, how this changes? Okay. All right. Substitute salary schedule, Mr. Parkman.
And I'll have Mr. Wells jump in on this too. As you know, we have faced a substitute shortage for a number of years, and we have done some recruiting. We tried an attendance incentive last year to see if that improved any at all. It did not, so we have moved away from that. I know Garrett has had some conversations with our Retired Teachers Association, and one of the things that they talked about was the pay scale. And so what we are recommending is that we move our substitute pay scale where it's actually slightly above Fayette to hopefully be able to attract not only subs maybe from other counties, but particularly our retired teachers, because we have not seen the number of retired teachers come back and sub like we used to many years ago. So, Gary, do you want to?
Yeah, just echo that. That's actually one of the ideas that came out of myself meeting with the retired teachers was someone said, it'd be nice if there was a little extra incentive for us to come back, because as Mr. Hawkins said, that used to be a pool of folks you could count on that would go into your sub pool, and as the years have gone on, less and less teachers retire through the subbing, and so
that was an idea that was mentioned, like, if there's a little extra incentive for us to do that. So you'll see that on the salary schedule. We have it breaking down into a few areas, with the last area being, if you are a retired teacher, then you kind of get the top end of the salary schedule. So.
What were the rates before? I'm looking at the new rates.
Yeah. Well, on what you have in front of you, it's basically broken down into 3 categories.
Right.
We had it broken down into probably 12 to 15 categories based on rank and experience. So we kind of condensed everything. But I will say in general, this salary schedule, depending on where you are in our current salary schedule, is anywhere from a $35 to $50 a day difference, with the biggest difference going to our retired teachers.
So the public knows what we're looking at is for non-certified teacher subs, it's $105 per day. Certified teacher subs is $130 per day, and retired certified teacher subs would be $165 per day. Do you have any guess or projection on how much of a change that would be from last year in total cost for the district?
I do not have the financial numbers on that. Obviously it might be a little bit of an additional cost, but the hope is that we'll get all of our classes covered, and hopefully covered with the most experienced teachers that we can get out there. So I do not have a figure to give you for that.
And I appreciate the objective for sure. Definitely need more subs.
Sure.
I just was wondering about the total.
Understood.
So non-certified, I'm sorry. Non-certified is 105, what is it now?
70 something.
And how long is a non-certified day? 8 hours? So we basically.
We pay our sub teachers in whole and half day increments. So anything over 3 hours and 45 minutes is a full day.
Okay. So it's not a great hourly rate. That's my point. And then the second category was certified, but just not working, but not retired. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, if you have a teaching certificate,
okay,
but you are not a retired teacher, you would be in that middle category.
And that was how much?
130.
130.
On days 1 to 20.
Yeah, 130 would be the daily rate for those that have a certificate that are not.
And are they
retired.
paid differently now? What is their salary now?
It ranges anywhere from
what you said
the low 90s to about 114 for our certified teachers.
Okay, and then the retired was 165.
Yeah, so they would.
And that's anywhere from 35 to 50 more a day.
Well, it would be about, if you're a retired teacher, more than likely you would be on the top end of our current salary schedule, which is about 114 a day. And so this, you can see what it would raise to for our, so they would actually get the largest increase would go to our retired teachers.
And then on after day 21 of subbing, the certified teacher's rate goes up to 180.
Correct, and it bumps up now as well. So when that's considered a long-term assignment. So just the day in, day out, I'm subbing here a day or a couple of days over here. That is the regular daily rate. If you sub a maternity leave, for example, you're going to be in that classroom for 6 weeks or more. That is considered a long-term assignment. And so on day 20, as it does now, it bumps up.
And it's not noted that same thing applies to the retired teachers, but I assume it would too.
The retired teachers, it bumps up to their daily rate because they can't go over, they can't go up to a certain amount. So it bumps up to what the retirement system allows them to make. That's what it goes up to because they're not allowed, and the daily rate is different for each person. It's based on their calculation, so they can't go over that individual rate. So it bumps up to that.
Did you look at surrounding counties? Can we see that for next week? Maybe just like, our normal Scott, Anderson, those surrounding counties. Did you look at what they're paying?
My primary focus was just looking at Fayette County's salary. We wanted to kind of get at that and maybe just a hair more to make it more attractive.
All right.
and I've brought this up before, and I hope we continue to look at it, at what point is it worth the district? We have such a need for subs to hire a permanent person who's a sub. You know, just make them a full-time, one or two, maybe even. So I hope we continue to evaluate that because.
We have talked about that as well. That was another strategy.
And maybe, yeah, when you have these new numbers, then it's going to be even more financially, you're closer to where that makes financial sense. So hopefully this does the trick. And they certainly earn this money, I would say. So.
Well, I think that the other thing too is that we're hoping that if we do this, maybe some folks who would like a little part-time employment. It's
just more steady.
Their kids, you know, you can pretty well work almost every day if you want
right.
to. And so.
And I think too, the great thing for those people in the community is they have the opportunity to not do it. If there's a conflict that particular day, you kind of get to pick and choose.
Okay. Any further questions on it? Go ahead, Mr. Wilson.
You know, percentage-wise, these are pretty good increases, and I'm very supportive of it because we fought this battle for year after year after year, not enough subs. And going above Fayette County is something I don't recall we've done before, but I applaud you for coming up with that plan, and I'm very supportive of it. I have a question for the superintendent. We just talked not long ago about not having enough bus drivers, not knowing if we'll be able to get all the kids picked up Monday. Could we apply this same principle to our bus drivers to make it more attractive to hire bus drivers?
We actually did address that salary a couple of years ago, and we did a comparison to surrounding counties to.
I know we
make
did
that,
but obviously it didn't work because we're down 10, and I was just curious your thought about using the same approach for bus drivers as we do subs. Let's get innovative, pay more than Fayette County, and attract the best.
We can certainly take a look at that if you'd like for us to.
Thank you very much. Garrett, great idea. Thank you,
brother. Just so people know, if they're hearing this tonight, Garrett, sorry, or Mr. Hawkins can probably do it. What is the process for becoming a certified sub, or becoming a substitute with the district? Sorry, didn't mean to let you get so far.
We have an online application. You just simply go to our website, woodfordschools. I'm sorry, we changed our website, didn't we?
Woodfordschools.org.
Is it still woodfordschools.org? Okay, www.woodfordschools.org. Go to Human Resources, you'll see all of our vacancies and certified substitute, which is a substitute teacher. That is a standing vacancy. That really never comes down. You just click on apply and complete the online application process. And probably within a few days, a week or so, we'll contact you about coming in for an orientation. You come in for the orientation, we go over paperwork, we go over how the pay works, we go over some substitute training that needs to be done, and go over background checks and all that stuff. So the main thing is completing the online application, and then we'll follow up with you about next steps.
Okay. What's next for Scott? Oh, the working budget. We all have a copy of that.
It's okay, I'm going to slide over here to the easel, so it might be easier to follow along with a couple of documents that you have. Bob, I'll just try to talk loud. Is that okay?
Yeah, because it's going there, so you're good.
Okay. If you'll look at the first document, which is this colored green, this is the expense document that we provided to the board back in February, I think, of this year. So it details all of our expenditures across the district. If you look at the last page of the expenditures, there is a total of $31,825,313. So that is the total of all of the expenditures that you notice on this page right here, or on these several pages. Okay? So if we look at the last page, which is the document that we presented to you it's the document we provided to you when we did the tentative budget in May. And it has the 3 columns where you can see the 4% budget, flat tax rate budget, and then the compensating rate budget. So we provided that to you. So if you notice, the expenditure at the top of that left-hand column, it's 31,617,064. The reason that is a little different than what you had over here on this page is that if you remember, Amy talked about the fact that the CERS contribution didn't go up like we thought it was going to. It's about $145,000. And then we also had about a $60,000 difference with the insurance that we were going to have to pay on our SLEOs. So those are actually savings. Those are no longer expenditures. So if you take that off, that's where you get the 31,617,064. So 31,617,064. That's the list of our expenditures. And again, that comes straight from the document that we provided to you back earlier this year. If you then continue on down that column, you will see these are projected revenues at the time that we did the tentative budget. This column right down through here. Okay? You'll see that we didn't know assessments at that time. We didn't know actual tax rate at that time. They are simply a projection of what we believe revenues are going to be. If you notice at the bottom of that page, 29,618,298 was our projected revenue. And then where you see then that very bottom figure is $1,998,766. That came strictly from this right here. So if you take our expenditures minus our revenues, that was nearly a $2 million projected deficit. Now, since that time, the board took action to unrestrict $600,000. And if you look on, I guess it's page 1 of this document here, I think it's line 35, you'll see that we had $950,000 there listed as a fund transfer. So the fact that you put $600,000 back in, technically our expenditures now are this minus $600,000 because that was no longer an expenditure. Okay? So that gives you $30,017,064. Now if you subtract those, our new projected deficit is $1,398,000 or 398. It's not very good, 766. Okay? So just a little cleanup from the document that we provided you and what Amy went through in June that was approved. Okay? So now I want to shift gears just for a second to this document. Okay? And if you look at page 2, you'll see revenues. And then that first column there, that is exactly what we took from that document I just showed you right here. That first column, you see, adds up, our revenues add up to 29,618,298. So it's exactly what we have over here. Now, We know our assessments, we know our tax rate, we know a little bit more information now. So the second column is what we project our revenues to be based on that new information. You can see there's a slight decrease in property taxes over what had been estimated. You'll notice on distilled spirits, we are putting in $1 million. The estimate on distilled spirits this year was 1.12 million. So we are budgeting about 90% of what that amount was.
Which is more than we budgeted last year.
We previously only budgeted about 75%. So we are budgeting nearly 90% of what the estimate was. It's also right at the same amount we received last year in the $1 million. The motor vehicles, again, that's assessments, that's the rate, so 1,240,000. All the rest of these are estimates because we have no idea what we will get in utility taxes. We have an idea. We don't know exactly. We don't know revenue in lieu of taxes, tuition and fees, transportation. If you notice the earnings on investments, the reason that is down, 2 years ago we earned about $260,000 in interest. Last year we only earned $183,000. So again, interest rates get lower, so we are being conservative with the $150,000. The other revenues are $96,815. If you look at SEEK obviously goes down when our assessments go up. We are also budgeting a potential 4% reduction in SEEK during the course of the year. I don't know if that's going to happen. This is based on what we dealt with in the last recession. We lost 4% of our SEEK revenue between those 2 years, I want to say it was 11 and 12. So we are trying to be, again, conservative with that, but also basing it on what happened in past history. So that's $9,100,000. We have other revenues of $199,000, $111,000. So our new revenue projection is $29,251,101. Okay? That is a difference of $367,197. $367,197. Okay? Now, any questions so far?
What makes up the other revenues?
It's several line items in a particular budget. I don't know that I can tell you, quote to you exactly what it is, but if you go through the budget on the revenue side, there are several pieces right below the earnings on investment that you add each of those up, and that's what comes up with the $199,111.
And the utility taxes.
This is you try to look at history and just project what you think it's going to be.
It doesn't usually go up though.
It can. It went up slightly last year, but again, with the pandemic, knowing that utility bills were deferred for some months, again, trying to be somewhat conservative. I think that's only about $36,000 less than what we got last year, though.
And the revenue in lieu of taxes, is that just from,
It's primarily from the warehouses, yes.
Midway?
No, the ones down by the Woodford Reserve.
We get that from Learning?
Pardon?
Learning Center, what is it?
They're actually paying their property taxes.
They're actually paying it.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is all from Woodford Reserve.
Correct. The vast majority of it. All right, any other questions? All right, now let's move to our, the next page is our expenditure page. And again, if you look at this first column, if you were to add up all of those expected expenditures, and you subtract out on behalf payments. If you remember, on behalf payments are a flow through. They're shown as a revenue, and they're also shown as an expenditure. But each of the budget line items contains on behalf payments. So if you were to add these up and then subtract out the on behalf payments, and the on behalf payments are projected to be $9,681,500. So if you were to add up these totals and subtract out $9,681,500, you end up with this number right here.
And they,
31,617,064.
is the on behalf revenue is the same as the on behalf expense.
Correct.
Because I'm looking at.
Correct.
I see a little different. But go ahead.
Okay? So if you add up this column, subtract out the on behalf payments, you get this figure right here. Now keep in mind the reason it's not different is because it still has the fund transfer of $695. See, that still included the $600,000 in there. So again, that's why it matches up with this number right here. Okay? Now, if you look at what we project, and you'll notice very little change in any of the items with the exception of instruction. That's where the biggest change is. And if you remember, we just added 13 teachers. So that's about a $600,000 increase right here to the instructional expense line item. Everything else, I mean, you might see a $20,000 increase, $30,000 increase, but very minimal when you think about a $2 million budget.
And are those mainly because of step increases?
It could very well be. It could be an increase in benefits. It could be.
Okay, but this includes all the step increases, these little increases.
What we yes, anticipate. Yes, ma'am. You'll notice then what we list down here, though, the $445,000 at the very end, that's the $350,000 transfer, fund transfer, plus the $95,000 cash transfer. That's where the 445 comes. So if you were to add up all of these items and subtract out the on behalf payments, again, the same on behalf payments, $9,681,500, you end up with $31,915,000. $637. If you were to take what our estimated expenses are and subtract the estimated expenses from June, you'll see that that is an increase of $898,573. $573. So this was our projected deficit from June after we moved the $600,000 back. We are projected to lose this amount of revenue compared to last year, and we increased our expenses from estimated expenses in June to now.
And two questions on that.
Okay?
What percentage of the 367,197 is the 4% seek adjustment that you're projecting? Do you know?
Of the loss, the 4% seek reduction is about $380,000.
So that's more than that amount. So if,
Our best case scenario, I'm gonna talk about worst case scenario, then I'll talk about best case scenario. Okay?
and then my other question is, what, on the 898,
Uh-huh.
what makes up the biggest portion of that?
The increase in teachers.
The
That was 600,000 of it.
Okay.
And that's a 1 year. Now, did we pay it for a full year, even though they're starting later?
Well, we'll pay them for when they start moving forward, ever how many days it is.
Okay.
And if things change, your intention on those positions is to use them for remediation in the second semester if they're not needed in a classroom position.
I would find it hard to believe we wouldn't need them in a classroom.
Sure,
but
no, I'm just saying, you know,
we will find something for them to do, yes.
Okay.
So if you total up these three figures, it's 2,664,000. 536. This is our worst case scenario deficit. Now, and again, I'm hopeful we don't get a seat cut. We're going to meet with the commissioner tomorrow on his webcast. I know all state agencies are being asked to prepare an 8% budget reduction. They want to try to hold seat harmless. We'll just have to wait and see if they can do that.
and
Oh, go ahead.
at what point will they, you've said it comes mid-year, do they have a date that they have to let you know by?
No.
Okay.
I mean,
We've gotten reductions with our last seat payment in the last quarter of the year.
Okay.
So
even for last year, we may get it in March.
So we won't know really until the legislature gets into session. But again, all state agencies are being asked to prepare for an 8% reduction. I don't know where KDE's going to get the money. I really don't. They've been cut to the bare bone as it is now. But that's one of the state agencies. I think universities are being asked to look at that as well. So again, I think we're just trying to prepare for the worst when we're dealing with an unknown situation.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
We're going to go way back to revenues.
Sure.
Do we have our COVID in here?
No.
Okay, so.
This is all general fund. This is all state and local revenue.
And so there's no title money
There's no, yeah.
Okay,
either.
all right. Okay.
So, when you talk about best case, as far as revenue goes, to me, it's if we don't get the 4% cut, and maybe we get a little bit more in distilled spirits. So potentially $600,000 more in revenue.
800.
600. 380 plus a couple $100,000 in distilled spirits.
Okay.
So that's about 580,000. I'm rounding up to about 600,000. So I think our best case is to maybe we get about 600,000 more in revenue.
And then we trim going forward up.
600,000 maybe in new positions.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I think, again, and the expenditure piece, we've never been through a pandemic. We don't know what to expect on the expenditure side of things. We're going to do the very best we can, but we're also going to do everything we can to meet the needs of our kids and ensure that if we need to provide additional resources, we do that. One of the things I'll be doing is asking our schools, once we get back in person, is to develop a plan for how they want to address things. So there may be more things that we come back to you with later on, if not at the end of this year, the very beginning of next year. So again, if you look at that next page where it says expenses versus revenue, there's your 31, 915, 637. Right there. There's your revenues, projected revenues, and again, this is what we believe is our worst case scenario.
And
if that were to happen, let me just finish one quick thought here. If we do that, you can see our beginning balance in 18-19 was 7.8 million. It went down to 6.8 million. It's down to a little under 6.7 million. If this deficit were to hold true, our beginning balance next year would be a little over $4 million.
So I think that's important to note when we talk about deficits, that we'd still be beginning the year with $4,017,000 in our general fund. And I know that it's that tricky window of the, the payments that come out and the assessment money coming in. But I do want to make sure that we're conveying that $4 million is where we start the year.
But you also have to understand though, if we're trending this direction with our expenses and our revenue, that $4 million would only last about 2 more years.
Right, but
So
our assessment grows every year. And even if we don't take the tax increase, the assessment still grows, so our income goes up correspondingly.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating for either way. I'm just making sure that we're presenting all the.
I understand that, but again, our trend over the last 3 years is that our expenses have outpaced our revenues.
And what percentage and I can do this as quickly, I'm sure, as you can, but on that $4 million,
$4 million.
that would be the beginning fund balance. So if we're looking at a total budget of the $31,617, our contingency fund is.
So it includes on behalf payments, and it also includes food service. So your contingency, they make you add in your beginning balance and your contingency to your beginning balance and your on behalf payments to get the total budget. So our total budget is $45,644,000.
But that also includes the title money, like you said. I'm looking at.
It doesn't include title. The $45 million is strictly general fund. If you take.
The funds are on the back page.
Yeah, it's got it listed here. So if
okay.
Our total budget is $45,644,000. That does not include any federal title money. That's separate.
So the total budgeting, or the total budget for the whole school year, you're looking at the $60,274,032.
That includes all funds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I'm saying just general fund.
Okay.
If you're talking about our general fund, it's $45,644,000. I believe it's 614. 614. Sorry, 444. Right. And then you have to add in our food service, because our contingency is based on adding those two together.
Okay.
And I think their budget is
2,867.
all right. So about 2.8 million. So if you add those two together, then you calculate your contingency based on that.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
This is Carrie. I just had a quick question. Could you please go over the contingency, how it's gone down over the past 2 to 3 years, just so that we can make sure everyone understands that's our emergency fund. And before we even hit the pandemic, before we even knew there was a pandemic, can you just go over how that's gone down?
Yeah.
I think he did say it. Go ahead.
Yeah. If you look at the beginning balance from 18-19, it was about 7.8 million, and then into the next year was about 6.8 million, and then this year we're starting with just a little under 6.7. If the worst case scenario happens, and that's an if it were to happen, but that's what we have to show in the budget to get it to balance, then it would be $4,017,000.
That's a very scary trend, and I guess I appreciate the conservative budgeting. I think that's the way that we've done it since I've been here, and I appreciate that we're looking at the different scenarios. But I'm just so so sad and frightened really to see how the contingency has gone down over the past 2 to 3 years. That's very, very worrisome.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Hawkins? Mr. Hawkins, will you complete?
The only other thing is that I just think it's important that we look at the future unknowns, because I think those are critical. We still don't know what needs our kids are gonna have. I think the current year state budget is still in flux. We don't know.
I think the state budget is the biggest thing.
Well, that, and we don't know FY22, because that won't be known until probably March or April. The duration of COVID, how long is it gonna last? How long are we gonna have to deal with this? And then, I do think it's important to know, future boards of education, what will their stance be on taxes? I don't know that. And that's.
And you superintendents too. I mean, you didn't recommend it this year. So yeah, that's always the end. All right, any further questions? I'm sure that we can reach out to Mr. Hawkins this week if we overlooked it and have more questions.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, next thing, this was Ms. Springgate's item I, J, I added K because that was another thing we did not complete with the high school that night that we ran so long. I know Ms. Springate, when you asked to add this to the agenda, you said that we had already discussed this in a planning meeting. I think we have probably discussed this issue a lot. I don't know if anybody has anything they want to say tonight before we vote on this next week. We did, Sherry?
Yes, I'm here. No, I felt like we discussed this.
Yeah.
It just, we ended that meeting without voting on these items, and I thought, since it was on the agenda, since it was something we were supposed to be voting on, the meeting went long, and we just ended it without, kind of finishing up. And I thought just for clarity's sake, and also just to be transparent, we should finish up that agenda. So that's why I asked if they be put on next week. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, is there any questions about the last three agenda items for next week? We did discuss them. I know the second one about options, we had a whole meeting with the architect then, so we can reach out to them if we need it this week. All right, we had two discussion items on the planning agenda. We'll go back. I think that was it for the regular, correct, Mr. Hawkins?
Correct.
We had two, and we're getting late here again. Impact survey. We did get Mr. Wilson, this was yours. Okay. Update on cyber fraud, Ms. Bradley.
I think Mr. Hawkins will do the update.
Yeah, I emailed the board, I think, last week on Friday to give you an update. Obviously, certainly disappointing when something like this happens, where we were taken advantage of by a group or an individual who we end up creating an account for a vendor, and then when payment was requested, we sent that payment, and then we found out a couple of months later that vendor did not receive it. So we have notified the state police. They are investigating. We've provided information to them. Our bank has been working with us, and we've also been working with our insurance company as well. And that is progressing along, and I'll certainly keep you updated as we move forward.
I'm curious if the state police handles this. Is this not a federal thing? Is that normal protocol?
We asked. And
I mean, you go there first, but
right.
They didn't refer it on?
They did not at this point, and so, but they were very responsive when we reached out to them, and so now we are just trying to, again, work through the process.
Is there a threshold that it does get elevated, a monetary loss amount that?
It goes to the FBI?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Okay. Anything else on that issue? All right. I think any other discussion items anybody wants to bring out? Next time we meet, we will have had kids in school for a day.
Madam Chair, there's one thing that Superintendent
letters is about going back to conducting our meetings in the schools. Have you and the superintendent
We
made
haven't
any?
talked about that yet. We can talk about that.
Yeah, I think until we kind of get the go-ahead on how many people we can have, because typically you have student performances, which brings in a larger crowd. As far as I know, we're still at the 50 threshold for
We
meetings.
haven't talked about it.
Okay, would you two talk about it and bring it up next week, please?
Sure.
Thank you. I move we adjourn.
Have a motion to adjourn, is there a second? Second. Have a motion by Mr. Wilson, a second by Ms. Bradley, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
I assume there was no executive session. Sorry about that.
Excellent. The overrun.